Our story begins with an unexpected twist for one man. He debated whether to use magic while he was on the run, but he had no choice. Either that or join the Magic Regulation Guild. A man in a hood with a pale face turned to a woman who had a cigarette in her hand and asked how long he would have to wait. The woman told him that her observer was still working. She also said that if someone tries to break into him, she will be the first to know about it. But before she could finish the sentence, some kind of magical portal appeared next to her. There was a loud shot, and that shot immediately killed the woman with the cigarette in her hand. The people who stood and looked at all this were shocked. They did not understand what had happened. A pale man in a hood asked the man who stood next to him, "Who did this?" As it turned out, she was killed by a man with purple eyes who had the power of a magical purple aura. He had a shotgun in his hands. He became a criminal and made himself many enemies from among the most dangerous magicians from all over the world. But we'll come back to this later. It's probably worth telling everything from the very beginning. The next event takes place a month ago. A man in a blue t-shirt is in handcuffs. In the investigation room, another man in black clothes came into this room and greeted Mr. Wells. The green-eyed man looked at the one who had just spoken to him and said that he did not know what they wanted from him. A man in a black suit and glasses began to sit on a chair opposite the man in handcuffs. The man with handcuffs asked if anyone could explain to him what was going on. And finally, the man in black introduced himself. He said that he was Agent Taryn from the Magic Regulation Guild, and he told the accused that he was detained on suspicion of involvement in the attack on the Shahe Fitness Center. The green-eyed man asked his interlocutor, "Is this really such a joke?" But his interlocutor said that there was no reason to laugh. The Dragonborn broke free, and Wells became the only witness who did not lose his mind at the sight of this. Agent Taryn said that magic exists, and it doesn't matter whether Wells understands it or, on the contrary, does not realize it. But he is a magician. The investigator wanted to start over. He asked where Wells was this morning. Wells then replied that he was at his mother's funeral. It was a terrible day, but he met a very strange man there. An unusual aura emanated from him. But still, he had already seen such people before, people from whom there was an otherworldly presence. To the rest of the world they seem invisible, but not to him. After he saw this man or ghost, he got a very headache. Absolutely no one paid attention to that glowing man. He slowly walked away. During his life, he had seen a couple of dozen such people, and it would no longer be possible to attribute this to his imagination, especially when one of them is the owner of the gym in the neighborhood where he usually went. The owner of the gym greeted our hero that day. Standing behind him was a large red beast resembling a dragon. When our hero thought that it was better to simply not show that he was seeing something. Although in truth, Mr. Shahe is a good guy and he spent a lot of time in his gym. And then one day this Mr. Shahe came up to our hero and asked him to do him a favor. He pointed his finger at a girl named Marie. She came here for the first time and he wants our hero to help her get comfortable. Wells, without thinking for a long time, immediately agreed to help that beauty get comfortable in the gym. After his wife died, Shahe tried over and over again to set him up with every visitor to the hall. Although he is not a person in the usual sense, but he always treated him with kindness, so he pretended not to notice these oddities. Therefore, he really liked this hall, and so he turned to that girl and said that the owner told him that she could use some help. And she agreed with him, but suddenly something began to happen to her. She began to fall. When Marie fell to the ground, our hero immediately ran up to her to help. At the same moment, several armed men burst into the gym. Wells, he understood what the hell this was. Is this really a robbery? The white-haired man turned to our hero and told him to quickly lie down on the ground. He fell to the ground and covered his head with his hands. He was always next to the girl, where the armed guys started shooting their guns straight at the Shaws. This man was an unusual person. The bullets bounced off him. He began to change. Then he screamed loudly, and a dragon's head appeared above him. Then he turned into a dragon and began spewing fire from his mouth. Thus, he began to confront those guys who broke into this gym. Wells absolutely did not understand what was happening, and again he had a headache. He tried in every possible way not to lose consciousness, but he did it poorly. He watched as the red beast fought with armed people. And so he fell to the ground and closed his eyes, and the next time he opened his eyes he noticed only the fire in front of him. Now he realized that he had lost consciousness after all. There was smoke around him. He looked at Maria, who was still unconscious. He understood that she needed help. He quickly grabbed her and began to lead her out of the gym so that she would not suffocate from the smoke. Right next to the head there was a damaged electrical cable. It exploded and fell right behind our hero's neck, so he received a strong electric shock. The blow was so strong that even his shoes began to smoke, but he was not going to give up. At some point, Wells got stuck with this purple glow that he saw earlier. He thought that he would not allow her to die here. It was necessary to get out of the building as soon as possible before everything here was consumed by fire. But after inhaling the acrid smoke, his limbs refused to move. He fell over and over again, but he understood that he had to survive. And besides, he needed to save the girl. A few more moments and he would simply die from severe smoke poisoning. The situation was critical. And as often happens in a critical situation, abilities that you don't even suspect about manifest themselves. This is exactly what happened for our hero. He teleported and found himself outside. He doesn't understand at all how he did it. He began to look at his hands to understand if this was a dream. There was a man next to him. This black man came up to him and asked what he was doing, and then told him to stand still. He snapped his fingers and magical things happened. It seems he began to collect the fire that was burning in that fitness room. Wells saw everything that happened here. He didn't understand. What the hell is going on here? And then that black man in the blue suit exhaled and straightened his tie, as if everything was going as it should. Then he turned to our hero and asked him who he was. Wells rose to his feet and asked the man in the blue suit what just happened. Then that black man asked, "Does our hero know anything?" He pressed a button in his earpiece and said that he had discovered Dragonfire in the Shahe Fitness Center. There was one victim, one witness. The criminals had escaped. Wells again asked this man to explain to him what just happened, because it seemed to him that he was just going crazy. The black man showed his tattoo on his wrist and asked our hero what his classification was. Wells asked him what it meant. After these words, the man in the blue suit slapped himself in the face, and our hero said that if he doesn't want to explain, then he won't ask questions. The mysterious man quickly touched Wells's hand and shackles appeared there. Wells felt that for some reason at that moment his headache went away. Then this black man grabbed our hero, twisted his arms and told him to go forward. The following events take place a few hours later in the Magic Regulation Guild. Now that black man and the investigator were communicating with each other, the investigator said that the authorities would tear off his interlocutor's head for leaving a magic blocker on Wells. He also said that he was surprised that this man was still conscious. The man in the blue suit said that he almost didn't notice the blocker. On the contrary, it made him feel much better. The investigator asked his interlocutor if he was sure that this was an unusual person. But the answer I received was that the security system should have knocked out every ordinary person inside the building. And this guy not only remained conscious, but also used some strange magic to pull the victim out of the fire. The investigator said that a 30-year-old man used magic, but was still not registered, and his family was completely ordinary. He did not understand how this was possible. The black man said that he also had no idea how it happened. He just brought him here, and the riddles he's not going to look. He's not going. Now let's go back to the investigator who talked with our hero. And he told him that if he carefully considers all these details, then we can come to the conclusion that he is not to blame for this incident. But this raises another question, and they need to check it and register it, and once they know the type of magic, they can figure out where to distribute it. Wells still did not understand at all what was happening at all, and what kind of distribution are we talking about? The investigator said that every magician serves in the Magic Regulation Guild. Usually people come to them at a young age, but it seems that this is not about Wells. Our hero replied that he works as an architect and has clients. The investigator said that as soon as he figures out his magical skills, she will go with this much better job. Wells asked, "Does he really have no choice?" He asked, "Can he forget this is all just a bad dream?" The investigator looked at our hero and said that the guild was hunting for deserters, and when he finds them, he immediately executes them, because criminals shouldn't create problems for others, right? After this, our hero was placed in a capsule for study. He was sent there without his consent. He thought that it was some kind of dictatorship. And then after training, they will take control of him. They did not like it at all. The guild is for everyone to serve them, otherwise death, but will not allow this to happen. The investigator asked Mr. Wells if he was ready for the first test. "Wells, ask your interlocutor what this test will be like." The capsule that our hero was located began to glow, and the investigator said that this device would begin to pour mana into him. Using this method, they will be able to find out what type of magic he has. Wells was very tense at this moment. He asked, "How long will it be?" The investigator said that this would happen within a few seconds, no more. Wells didn't understand whether they had already started or not. He didn't feel anything. But suddenly he felt unbearable pain and fell to his knees. It was hard for him to breathe. He shouted that something was wrong and let everything stop the test. But the investigator said in a calm voice that they were almost finished. Wells didn't understand. Are they mocking him? This thing is going to kill him. After some time, our hero woke up. The investigator stood next to him and said that he had finally regained consciousness. Wells asked him if this should have happened, but the man in the black suit replied that actually not. Apparently, it was all about his age. They had never conducted tests on such an adult. But while he was unconscious, they applied a magic mark to him. He looked at his wrist and saw that he had some kind of tattoo there. These guys clearly don't care about freedom. The man in the black suit said that space mages are quite rare. Most likely he will need a mentor. They will include the costs for him in Wells' check. Our hero was absolutely not happy with what was happening here. These swindlers also demanded money from him. Wells climbed out of the bed he was lying on and asked if he could go home to sort out his affairs before everything started. The investigator said that Agent Sen would be with him. He would be his officer for the next week until Wells was assigned. Wells approached Agent Sen to greet him and get to know him. But that man completely ignored our hero and looked at his phone. After some time, our hero was already in the car and driving somewhere. Agent Sen was sitting next to him. Wells said that, apparently, he owns the magic of space. He is interested in finding out where to distribute such abilities. Sen said that most likely he would be assigned to the transportation department. Space magic is not attacking, so he will be a porter or loader. Wells asked his interlocutor. What is his specialty? Sen replied that for the most part he is a pyromancer, so he will be sent to the front line, but he still has a little aeromancy. Wells thought that this guy looks like a spoiled brat. Then he asked him what exactly the guild was fighting for. Sen replied that the guild was fighting for a lot of things. For example, hunting down magicians and criminals all over the earth, or sending people to the front lines in the worlds of the 6 portals. Our green-eyed hero looked at his interlocutor and asked, what kind of portal measures these are? Sen remembered that a newcomer was sitting next to him, and then said that this is what they call the small worlds that exist between the Earth and the multiverse. They supply the planet with mana, so they protect them. Moreover, each world has its own supernatural things, such as vampires, werewolves, goblins, kobolds, dragonborn, and sea monsters. Wells. Although specify how many such worlds there are, his interlocutor answered that later. He will find out everything. Wells looked at him in disbelief and then thought that he didn't believe a single word he said. After some time, they arrived at the place where they were heading and went inside. Before leaving our hero here, Sen gave him a laptop and said that here he would find the basics of magic. And tomorrow he will take him back to the Eastern headquarters. Therefore, he should hurry up and do everything he wanted as quickly as possible. Wells studied the information that was provided to him. He realized that apparently magical energy is divided into 2 categories, mana and vis. Mana is something akin to the atmosphere of the earth from which mages can draw energy, but the magician's own mana is called vis. Unlike mana, vis has its own specifics, such as Wells has a talent for spatial magic. He wanted to learn as much as possible about all this, but this is only the basics and basic things. He is starting to fall behind seriously. After all, most magicians study all this from childhood, in a magical kindergarten. Wells thought that perhaps it was worth practicing, but starting with something simple. He looked at the table and saw that there was a pen there. He decided to try it with that. Wells raised his hand and began to concentrate on the pen that was standing on the table. He tried to focus and something began to work out for him. The pen on the table began to move, and then she suddenly took off into the air like a rocket. Our hero did not yet know how to control this force. The swift one pierced the ceiling, but our hero was pleased that he had achieved at least something. Essentially, he was now using crude magic based on mana, although it would be worth learning how to use Whis. Well, the spell still works. Perhaps working for that office is such a bad idea for me. He can practice there, but first he needs to find out what exactly awaits him there. The Guild of Magic Regulation is a secret organization that brings together the most powerful people from all over the world. He read all this on the laptop he received. In any case, such an organization should have skeletons in the closet, and he will not allow them to make himself a cog in their mechanism. And after some time of training, he realized that, as expected, it seems that Sen deliberately left out some details that should have been clarified during the distribution. As it turned out, the mortality rate in that company was 52%. The most common causes of death were military clashes and illegal activities with the world of 6 portals. There's even nothing to hide here. It's all about the politics of the guild. Almost all deaths fall to the lot of magicians who do not work for large families or the guild itself. And if you consider that archmagicians can live for hundreds of years, then it is not surprising that they are trying to crush everyone under themselves. Wells thought that after so many years of life, they were probably tired of everything in this world. Thanks to the bureaucracy, the current system can exist without their intervention, And all because people with power are trying to push their interests. Wells closed his laptop and thought that he didn't need all this and didn't want to get involved in it. This company is forcing everyone to serve them. Meanwhile, Sen was sleeping on the sofa. Wells thought that he would rather die than do with his freedom. For him, freedom was always the most important thing. If they want criminal magicians, then they will get them. Our hero made the decision to run away from them, and he understood that if he wanted to hide from them, it was better to take care of some things in advance. He opened the safe and collected the money from it into his bag. One mistake, and the entire guild would go after his head. Finally, he opened the door and was about to quietly leave there, but something happened that he did not expect. When he was already stepping through the window, the parquet floor creaked under his feet. Moreover, it creaked so loudly that Sen heard it and woke up abruptly. Wells realized that things were bad. Sen quickly ran into the room where our hero was to check if everything was okay. When he arrived there, he noticed an open window and realized that he did not have time. Wells ran away right from under his nose. This made him very angry, and he began to glow with a green glow. He began to use his power with the thought that they would now see how far Wells could escape. Meanwhile, our hero had already gone deeper into the city and mixed with the crowd of people. He understood that he needed to get away from here. He broke away from Sen, but who knows how quickly he will find him. Now, knowing how magic works, he can assume that he has one of the abilities for fast movement. Wells recalled that Sen said that he was a prio and an aeromancer. It seems he was talking about this. The worst-case scenario would be if he could fly like a fighter. And as it turns out, this Sen can really fly, and he does it quite quickly. Wells understood that if everything went as he thought, then he had no chance of escape, and he accelerated as quickly as possible. Sen was chasing our hero and thought that this fool must have a good excuse for running away. Otherwise, he made himself an enemy. While he was flying, you thought that if he becomes a criminal magician, then the guild will send a very dangerous and powerful agent after him. Moreover, the agent will be much stronger than Sen, because they have incredibly powerful people. Sen thought that it might be worth reporting the incident. If he really ran away, then Agent Theron had better find out about it. But still, he understood that his reputation was at stake, and he should not let them know that this fool had escaped. That's why he was going to deal with it all himself, and he immediately went looking for Wells again. After some time, he flew near our hero. While he was shining with this green glow, other people did not see him. Sen flew past Wells and looked into his eyes. He realized that he had found the one he was looking for. At that moment, he smiled. Wells thought that things were critical. This devil got here faster than he could imagine. Then he started pushing people around him and ran away as quickly and as far as possible. Sen shouted that Wells couldn't hide from him, so he shouldn't even try. He shouted that Wells was just a small fry in a big mechanism. Wells ran faster and faster, and Sen flew behind him. People thought that the wind was getting stronger, and perhaps a storm was approaching. Wells looked around and realized that it looked like these people did not see his pursuer. He flies literally centimeters from their faces, but it seems they don't see him because of mine. Wells thought that if he was in the crowd, it would be difficult for Sen to use magic so as not to hurt ordinary people. But now he understood that it looked like he would have to look for another way. Wells ran past one of the stores, and there he noticed some clothes. At that moment, he had a plan. Meanwhile, Sen lost him from his field of vision and looked around to see where that idiot had gone. And then he noticed someone who was very similar to Wells. He stood on the ground with his feet and canceled his magic. He then quickly ran up to the man and grabbed him by the t-shirt. That man looked around and asked Sen how he could help him. Sen realized that he had made a mistake and immediately began to look around to find who he was looking for. He looked around in panic and suddenly noticed something. It was our hero's bag that he lost. A man with black hair approached it to inspect it. When he opened this bag, he saw our hero's clothes there, which he quickly put into this bag. He decided to take the bag with him just in case, but Wells himself was nowhere to be found. He thought that this damn rat had deceived him. Meanwhile, Wells had already changed his clothes and hid his head with a hood and put a bandage on his face. He stopped a taxi and told the driver to go to Wesley's farm. He also told the driver to stay off the highway. He understood that commercial planes were easy to follow. If he spent a little money, he could rent a corn truck. While he was not very good at mastering his magic, he decided to use means of transportation that were more familiar to him. He thought that this was not the fastest way, but by morning he should already be far from here, in some remote place. Although he got new clothes, he couldn't hide in them forever, and now he had already arrived in some new place. He thought that he needed to completely change his appearance, so he bought hair dye. He also cut his hair and dyed it black, changes that could save lives. He's never done anything like this, but black hair clearly suits him, and now he needs to sort out the paperwork. A magician needs an ordinary ID, so if he finds a magic pawn shop, they will probably be able to get one for him. That's exactly what happened. He saw a man who looked like a goblin, but other people saw this man as an ordinary person. Wells approached him and greeted him and then said that he needed an ordinary ID. The goblin, without thinking for a long time, simply said without further questions that it would cost him 2,000. Wells took out his money and said that he also wanted to take the laptop. And a moment later, he already had new documents in his hands. His new name is Chase Hall. Everything was going quite well, and he thought that everything should work out. He thought about the fact that he lived for 30 years wielding magic, and that company was never able to track him. So if freedom is important to him, then he can do it again. Meanwhile, the investigator asked Sen how he could miss it. Sen said that they only planned to spend the night there, so he only cast a spell on the doors. How could he know that he was thinking of jumping out the window? The black man said that he did not feel any magical traces. It seems that he just ran away without leaving anything. The investigator said that Archmage Duvala obviously wouldn't like this. She wanted to start training with him tomorrow. The man in blue clothes said that if this boy knew who would train him, then it is not surprising that he ran away. The man with glasses said that he is glad that his interlocutor looks at this situation with humor. I finally find out that it was yesterday that a living man is called Agent Jean. Also here. The man with glasses said that he is sure that Jean will not mind explaining to the Archmage what is going on here happened. Jean immediately tensed up at this moment and said that he had nothing to do with it at all. Well, after all, he went to explain this situation to the Archmage, and for him it was very painful. He tried to say something about how they had instructed all free agents to find him, but the Archmage was very angry and strangled her interlocutor with a magical whip. Jean said that he even asked vampires and werewolves for help, but she knows how to deal with them. He also said that besides, she knows how difficult it is to learn to control spatial magic alone. Maybe this guy just decided to live an ordinary life? The Archmage said that he was talking some nonsense and then threw him on the ground. She also said that not a single person in the world would refuse to use magic. Now he is an unusual person and the magician is a criminal. Jean said that she was right, and he would continue the search. He felt that now his life could end. The Archmage leaned over him and said that she prayed to God that Agent Jean would find that person as soon as possible. Otherwise, she will have to deal with all this herself. If Callum Wells really decided to become a criminal, then he must be immediately captured and executed. Meanwhile, our hero was already trying to live a completely different life while on the run. The following events take place in a small western town. Wells drove up to a small house, where he was met by a woman and a man who was a policeman. As soon as our hero got out of the car, the man immediately asked if he wanted to buy this property. Wells said that everything was correct, and then asked if they were the owners. The man in your police uniform said that this property belongs to his daughter named Jessica, and he is Sheriff Arthur Langley. Wells smiled and called his new name Chase Hall, but the sheriff took a closer look at this stranger. They shook hands, and then went inside the house to discuss some details. The gray-haired man turned to our hero and asked him what he would say about this. Wells replied that it was quite quiet and cozy here, so he could do some repairs. Meanwhile, the red-haired woman told our hero that he looked too young to retire. Wells smiled and said that he was not going to retire. He just needed to relax a little and improve his health. The woman said that she has been trying to buy this house for a long time, but there are not many buyers. Wells said with a smile that this was good news for him. The following events take place the next day, after buying this house. He will have enough money for about 2 years of a quiet life. He's still worried about something. He needs to learn more about magic. If he doesn't look into it, it's a matter of time before that company comes for him. All reference materials say that magic space from spells has only portals and a couple of enchantments. Only after all this that he has experienced does he no longer believe in it. But studying the magic of space seems impossible without a teacher in the form of the Archmage Duvala. The mere fact of how great her authority is makes one wonder how unshakable the system is within this company. He recalled that he created his first portal completely by accident. In fact, his subconscious worked more here, and now he wants to see if he can do this not by accident. Our hero immediately began to purposefully create a portal, and it began to work out for him. After several attempts, the same portal formed right in front of him, through which he could already pass. He sighed heavily and then thought that, let it be what will be. And I decided to step into this portal to be transported a short distance. And he succeeded. He calmly moved from one point to another. The distance wasn't too far, but for the first time it was pretty good. He was wondering how else he could use this magic. He needed to try something else. The following events take place a few days later on Monday. Our hero was taking a shower. He didn't notice that the shampoo had already run out and he didn't want to dry himself again and go for another shampoo. So he used his power and created a small portal through which he stuck his hand and took new shampoo. He did it quite simply, and now he realized how useful his skill was. The next event takes place on Wednesday. I again practiced and tried to form the sphere of Vis. This is the first thing that magicians are taught from childhood. Although the space ball has no attacking properties, it looks pretty cool. A couple more days passed, and Friday came. Wells continued to practice and thought that all the training manuals said that telekinesis manifests itself only in combat magicians. But it does not apply to such people. There is telekinesis and gravitokinesis, but he can manipulate gravity, which is a distortion of space. The result was a kind of telekinesis for the poor. The magic of space was not conceived in this way. Wells understood that without normal training, this method would work. He took several stones and attacked a tree that stood nearby with them. On Sunday, he went to nature to meditate a little. He concentrated and thought about using the mana around him. Thus he can see with his eyes closed. He even tried to look through things and succeeded, but it takes effort. And also the range of this technique is limited. He noticed that the same woman with red hair came here. She called our hero, and he immediately interrupted his meditation and went to her. He remembered that this woman's name was Jessica and asked her what brought her here. She told him that the kids' school was starting soon. Some might try to take a shortcut through his yard. She said that they always told them that they shouldn't do that, but they still continued. Wells replied that it was no big deal, but he had not yet completely cleared the yard. Jessica said that she was not worried. Local children would be happy to help him. They love spending time in the fresh air. Jessica said that she lives nearby, so she came here to say hello, and she also explicitly hinted to him that he should not be shy and come to visit her. Wells smiled and said that of course he would definitely come to her. When she started to leave, our hero was immediately very tense and thought, has she already noticed this? He's been training for several hours already. He has vis everywhere, and also a lot of traces of mana left. He urgently needs to figure out how to remove the residual magic, because it is very dangerous. If someone senses it, then his disguise will come to an end. He will quickly be caught. The following events take place in the office of the same investigator who interrogated our hero. A woman in a white coat brought him some papers. He asked what it was. She told him that these were the results of a standard test that they gave him. It showed that the test subject had never used magic before. But she also said that there were anomalies in the results. The man with glasses asked, "What kind of anomaly?" The woman replied that she did not notice this until she came to check the measuring instruments. The test subjects dissipated 100 tatums of mana. Here it is necessary to explain that tatum is a unit of measurement of magical energy. The woman looked closely at the bracelet and said that there were only 3 left in it. It turns out that somehow he was able to absorb 97 tatums of mana before this bracelet was put on him. The man with glasses asked what this meant. The woman in the robe replied that it meant that an ordinary beginner would hardly be able to withstand such an amount of mana. This beauty straightened her hair and said that if we consider that he never used magic, then his supply of vis should be full. And besides, he also did not cast any spells. She also said that, to be honest, she has no idea what this all means, but she is sure of one thing. All this is due to the fact that in 30 years the magician has never used magic. They were interested in finding out more details. Who exactly is this Callum Wells? Meanwhile, our hero was very busy with his important affairs. He was in the house and thought that it seemed that this amount of vis would be enough. Vis. This is a type of magical energy that is unique to each magician. Then, our hero put the bearing on the nightstand. And with the help of his magic, he began to rotate this bearing. And it seems that he started to succeed. He thought that this was absolutely perfect. He learned about this spell from the internet. And now in this way he can collect energy on the balls inside the bearing. This will help get rid of his magic. And also thanks to this method, it will be more difficult for that sinister company to track him. Only a few weeks have passed, and he has already made good progress in the study of magic. Wells thought that he should have been happy, but for some reason he felt empty inside. He ran away from those people the day he buried his mother. Everything happened very quickly. He couldn't even say goodbye to her normally and come to terms with the loss of a loved one. His parents are buried in that cemetery, as well as his wife. He remembered his hometown. What bright memories there were then when everyone was together. Wells thought about how Selena would like it here. He really wanted her to be there now. And then he began to throw away all those thoughts and he thought about what he needed to think about. What should he do now? The corporation of those magicians wants to catch him and turn him into a draft horse. They forced him to run away, so he had no intention of losing. He needs to try to learn as much as possible about this town if he wants to fit in with the rest. Our hero came to a local store where he was greeted by a nice girl who said that it looked like he was here for the first time. Wells told her that he was really here for the first time and was walking around looking around. He asked if she could advise him anything. The girl replied that they had good steaks, but at that moment he felt something. It was not clear to him what these strange sensations were, and he suddenly began to scan everything around using magic. He sank deeper and deeper and noticed that under this place there is a basement, and it is much larger than he expected, but this is not it. Finally, he discovered that there was some kind of dog there, but what surprised him even more was that it was almost as tall as a man, and his scanning of the area was interrupted by a man who approached him and addressed our hero. It was the same old sheriff. He greeted our hero and said that it was strange for him to see him here. Wells also greeted the sheriff and said that he just decided to get acquainted with the local cuisine. The sheriff told him that his niece cooks the best steaks here. This girl's name was Clara. Wells said she seems like a pretty good kid. And to be fair, most of the kids in the area are very well behaved, and none of them are trying to get into his yard. The sheriff said that they pay great attention to respecting other people's territories, but our hero, in bewilderment, asked why he calls them territories. Sheriff put his hand on his interlocutor's shoulder and said that he did not want to distract him from lunch. And then he approached him and whispered in his ear that he wanted to tell him that he had recently come across suspicious guys, so if he saw something unusual, he should let him know. Wells was very tense at that moment. He did not understand what kind of suspicious guys we were talking about. Then, Wells decided to turn it all into a joke and said that he also looked strange. Did the sheriff really warn other people about him? The sheriff said that to tell the truth, he told several, but then he realized that the guy came from a small town. But then the sheriff said in an ominous voice that those guys are different from our hero. Wells was even more frightened. He thought that perhaps these were the same guys who were looking for him. Then things would be bad. His thoughts were interrupted by a blonde girl who brought him his order. Wells jumped in surprise at that moment. He went to his car and thought that if they tracked him, it would only be through this mark on his hand. He understood that he needed to somehow get rid of this mark. He needed to find out more about it. Arriving home, he began to look at this tattoo and thought that it seemed that his magic was limited by this one. In the middle of the tattoo, it signals that he is a space magician. He thought that it shouldn't hurt, it's just a drop of ink. And then he began to use his power to try to get rid of this annoying sign. But when he tried to do this, he felt severe pain in his hand, and it seems that something started to work out for him, as if he was pulling some kind of dark essence from his wrist. It was very unpleasant. The pain continued even after he removed that tattoo. And then the little sphere was levitating in his hand, and there it was. But the rest of the tattoo should disappear over time. Meanwhile, it was also oozing blood. Wells lit the fireplace in advance and threw this little black dot into it. This drop of ink was quickly lost among the flames, and our hero quickly forgot about it. The next day, he began to study other materials on the topic of magic. He thought that if this vortex spell can hold his whys, then he wonders if it can release it. Making portals and small spells is now not difficult. But Vis's expenses depend on the scale. If he tries to do something for which he is not ready, it will completely deprive him of his strength. He decided to try to make the system more efficient on a power bank for the phone. How will he be able to constantly recharge his vis if the situation gets out of control? For example, when he suddenly needs to escape somewhere. Suddenly, someone distracted him. Someone knocked on the door. Wells immediately tensed up. He didn't understand who was knocking on the door and whether he should answer. He kept thinking that it could be the same company. In general, why could he scan the area with the help of magic and see that two policemen were standing there? It was the sheriff and another young man in a police uniform. Wells came out and greeted the sheriff, and then asked what brought him here. The sheriff apologized for the sudden visit, and then said that he needed to ask our hero a couple of questions. Wells was very tense and asked, "Did he do something strange?" The sheriff looked carefully into our hero's eyes and asked where he was yesterday at 3 a.m. Well, let's see what our hero was doing yesterday at 3 a.m. At this time, he was lying in his bed, and the thoughts that everyone was constantly talking about some kind of territory did not leave him. And besides, he managed to scan that man in the form of a dog in the basement. He began to understand that most likely the Langley family were werewolves. But what was the chief trying to tell him in the cafe? Perhaps he wanted to scare him by saying that he had recently come across some suspicious guys. But at the same time, he said that if our hero sees something unusual, then let him know. From this, we can conclude that perhaps he, on the contrary, wanted to help him. He tried to drive these thoughts away from himself, because he still needed to lie low. He felt someone scratching under the window, and it scared him. He didn't understand what it was and quickly got out of bed. He heard a loud roar, and immediately began scanning the area to see what it was. But he only managed to catch someone's shadow, someone running, some kind of animal. This animal moved very quickly, and now she is far away. It is difficult for him to see him. Our hero's curiosity was still stronger than fear, and he decided to go out into the yard to look around. Wells turned on the flashlight and began to scan the area, but nothing was visible. He had already begun to think that it was just his imagination, and in fact, there was nothing wrong. But suddenly a cold wind blew at his back and it scared him. He quickly ran into the house and slammed the door behind him. Now let's go back to the conversation with the police. Wells asked why they needed information about where he was at 3 a.m. The sheriff said that there was no need to be angry. He had to ask this question. Wells told the sheriff that he was just sleeping, but what happened? The sheriff asked if he had any evidence, like a security system or something. Wells was very tense at this moment. He asked the sheriff. Maybe he should call a lawyer. He immediately said with a smile that there was no need to do this, because his interlocutor was not a suspect. He just wanted to immediately exclude our hero from the list. Wells said he has a security system, but it's on the doors and he doesn't have cameras. Wells himself thought that even if he had cameras, he would not have provided access to them. He too often practices magic in the backyard. The sheriff adjusted his hat and said that in fact there had been a murder up the street. Wells was shocked by the sheriff's statement. He asked if it was true. Another policeman who was standing next to the sheriff said that someone broke into Old Man Hardy's house, but as they can assume, Wells did nothing. Wells scratched his neck and said in an uncertain voice that he didn't do anything. I was actually thinking about the noise I heard on the street outside the window at about 3 a.m. It seemed to him that he was so fixated on that company and werewolves that he completely forgot that ordinary killers exist. The sheriff saw that our hero was somehow nervous and behaving strangely. Wells fell silent for a while and the sheriff asked, did he remember something? Wells did say that something woke him up last night and he thought it was a big animal, but that's all he knows about. The sheriff quickly wrote something down in his notebook and thanked our hero for telling them this. It might help them, and they would contact him if new details came to light. And the sheriff and his deputy began to leave, and the deputy asked the sheriff if he really believed that man. Wells heard the sheriff say that he was probably missing something, but this guy was definitely not a killer. Then they got into the car and the sheriff said that frankly, they both knew who was guilty of the crime, but he still hoped that it was not true. He also said that things in their town were getting darker and darker. The following events take place in another place. At the moment he pulled out a gun in front of one man with black hair and shouted to him that he cannot kill in his city. This is the territory of the Venuta pack and not his. In front of him was a vampire. This vampire said that he had no idea what Mr. Langley was talking about. If one of his ordinary dogs came to an end, then it was not his concern. The sheriff said angrily that the man was killed by vampires. The vampires tried to portray everything as if they had nothing to do with it. The gray-haired sheriff approached the vampire and pointed his finger at him, and then said that he could smell parasites like him a mile away. The vampire behaved absolutely calmly and said that he still did not understand what his fault was. The responsibility for the fact that such a rabble was roaming around on his territory was clearly not his fault. The vampire also said that unless, of course, he means that the killer is one of his guys. Then he looked with his red eyes at the sheriff and said that in this case this is a serious charge. The sheriff hit the table with his fist and said that there had never been any vampires here before his interlocutor arrived, and he was sure that this was one of his comrades, and he would call them to account. The vampire, in the same calm tone, said that he wanted to see how he would succeed, and the sheriff was furious. The vampire said that if the Venuta pack wants to challenge them, then he will gladly accept it. The sheriff got angry and threw the table aside. He said that this blood-sucking creature would get what he deserved, and the vampire told Mr. Langley to be more careful. They looked into each other's eyes very unfriendly. Hatred could be read on both their faces. Then the sheriff shouted for the deputy to get this vampire out of his sight. After some time, the sheriff was near the blonde girl. He said that they had killed one of the measured inhabitants, and they would continue to do this as long as they outnumbered them. The sheriff said that he could not even contact their leader, and he was low-ranking, insignificant vampire. The boss was very angry and said that he wanted to drive these creatures out of their city and send them somewhere far away from here. He only regretted one thing, if he was even a little younger. As it turned out, he was talking on the phone all this time. Chester asked if the sheriff was done being angry. The sheriff calmed down a little and turned to Alpha Chester, saying that he was done being angry. He often said that without evidence, the Magic Regulation Guild would defend the vampires. Chester said that he would send the sheriff to 2 of the wolf pack, but if he challenged the bloodsucker, then he shouldn't expect help from them. Chester also said that he suspects that there is more than just a den of criminals involved here. The sheriff asked why Venut should suffer. There was nothing there. Chester said that the matter is not only in Venuta, at least 5 other cities have a similar situation as theirs. The sheriff asked why then, are the rules of the Magical Regulation Guild needed if everyone can come and calmly break them? Chester said that he understood his interlocutor's dissatisfaction, but if he could catch them red-handed, they could destroy them. So you need to look carefully at every detail. The question is not when the vampires will kill, but who they will kill. And it is quite possible that this is somehow connected with our hero. Perhaps these vampires were targeting him. But we will find out this a little later. Wells came to one store. He realized that he had to be careful, and he needed to buy some things. Although he still has a lot of money, some of it needs to be set aside for unforeseen circumstances. Because of this murder and werewolves, he became somewhat twitchy. We may have to leave this place soon. Our hero was very tense all the time and looked around. But considering how much money he spent on this house, who would be the worst-case scenario? He hoped that he could earn extra money by enchanting objects and selling them on magic forums. Well, to use it, you need to overcome a number of serious limitations. In any case, its magic does not last more than a couple of hours on the bearings, so there is no point in selling them. He was at home and thinking about all this. He quickly closed his laptop and thought about what to do with this account in order to be discovered. How did he think that it would be nice now to actually strengthen his house by putting up barriers or something like that? He had an idea to enchant the wall with gravity so that bullets would be reflected, but he couldn't cast the spell for more than a minute. He is sure that he would have done better if he had more knowledge, but all the advanced techniques of spatial magic are guarded by the Archmage Duvala herself. Without knowledge, he feels limited, as if he is reinventing the wheel from scratch. Our hero also went to a weapons store to buy some weapons for himself. The seller asked our hero if he had decided to protect himself. Wells smiled and said that with what was happening in the area, it was better to play it safe. And it's not just the killers. He can't shake the feeling that the Magic Regulation Guild might be waiting for him just around the corner. While buying a gun, he thought about how interesting it is how effective bullets are against everything supernatural. He recalled that moment in the gym where the shootout began. But as they say, if you don't try, you won't know, so he bought a gun just in case. While he was examining his new acquisition, he heard familiar voices. There were 2 blonde girls. Langley was there, and they were choosing hammers. Wells didn't think about the fact that they liked to do repairs. He approached the girls from behind and asked what brought the cook and the waitress here. He said this very sharply and the girls got scared. One of them asked Mr. Hall not to scare them. Wells apologized and said that they too seemed worried about the murder that had taken place. One of the girls said that poor Joan often visited their church. Wells said he thought they were going to talk about James Hardy. Our hero's interlocutor told him in a whisper in his ear that last night there was another murder. Miss Joan Gruber died. Didn't he hear? Wells said in surprise that he did not know about this. He had been busy all morning. Is there really another death? He understood that some kind of serial killer was working. Our hero's interlocutor said that they were thinking about closing the cafe until everything calmed down. Wells said that it was very sad. If there is something he can help with, then just let them ask. The girls said that they really appreciate it. They always called him Mr. Hall, but Wells said they could just call him Chase. After talking with the girls, he turned around and began to leave, thinking that things were very sad. And one more death, but what kind of serial killer is this that is hiding even from werewolves? Langley loves their small town, so one can assume that they do not allow the Magic Regulation Guild to prowl around in search of a criminal. But if deaths continue, there will be no choice left. He will need to prepare. Both murders occurred not so far from his home, and judging by the frequency of deaths, there should be another death today. Wells began to create a board of suspects on which he marked everyone he knew in order to collect all the evidence. He realized that there were 2 threats. The first threat is a serial killer with supernatural forces who are still at large. And the second danger is that the Magic Regulation Guild may send agents to investigate. And each of these threats can appear on his doorstep at any moment. He uses his mana sense to the fullest and will not allow anyone to get close to him. He had previously collected everything he needed in a bag of enchanted bearings. He also loaded the weapon, and as soon as he senses the presence of any danger, he will immediately run away from here. Although losing such a house was really unpleasant for him, because it was very expensive. But this is just a small price to pay for hiding from the Magic Regulation Guild. The radius of his spatial sense expands. If he tenses up more, he will be able to see what is happening in the city itself. This is exactly what he did. He noticed that Jessica was guarding the cafe. Clara goes to the store. All this time she looks around and is cautious. The sheriff is in his department and reading some documents. Wells sat down on a chair holding a gun in his hands and sighed heavily. He understood that this night would be long. But still, he could not stand it and fell asleep. All these experiences exhausted him very much, so the night passed quite quickly. Morning came. Wells was still sleeping. Suddenly, he heard some noise and quickly jumped up, grabbing his gun. He realized that he had passed out. After scanning the entire area, he noticed that a girl was approaching him. She was running and calling him. Jessica was in tears and in panic. Wells understood that something must have happened. It seemed to him that it was his fault. Next time, he should be more careful about spending mana. Wells opened the door and asked her if everything was okay. Jessica, in a panic, grabbed his hands and screamed that he should help her. She held him very tightly and he asked her what happened. Jessica sobbed loudly and barely said Clara's name through her tears. She said that they took Clara. Jessica meant that the vampires stole her. Wells still didn't know who he was talking about, and he asked Jessica, who took her? She replied that they were vampires. They were lying in wait for her around the corner. Just at the moment when she went out into the store, the vampires realized that it was the sheriff's puppy. Then they quickly pounced on her and attacked, trying to stun her. When the girl looked around, she noticed a vampire in front of her who greeted her ominously. He looked into her eyes as if hypnotizing and asked why doesn't she come with them. Since she was hypnotized, she went with them. Jessica said that they took her to their lair. She begged him to help. He told her that he could help. Wells was confused at that moment. He didn't know what to tell her and what to do. He didn't understand. Should he confess to her that he knows about supernatural things? Jessica was one of those who saw him before he learned to hide his vis. Will she be able to convince her that he is not a magician? Wells told her to go inside the house. He wanted to calm her down. Our hero was very doubtful about what to do, but then he grabbed her by the shoulder and thought that he had to help her. He cannot allow vampires to abuse Clara. It would be too inhumane on his part. Wells sat Jessica on a chair and told her that she just said that they captured her. So it turns out that they didn't kill her? Jessica is still in a panic, but having calmed down a little, she said that this is so. Wells thought that he had practically no chance of defeating supernatural beings in a fair fight, at least for now. While he was thinking, Jessica got up from her chair again and grabbed our hero by the hand and again began to ask him to help. Wells, like a true gentleman, could not leave the girl in trouble, especially since he liked her, and she liked him, and he told her that he would do everything he could. He put the gun in the gun case and said he needed more information. Wells was going to help, but he hesitated, hoping that he wasn't making a mistake right now. Sometime later, he was driving near a motel in his car. There, he noticed some woman standing and smoking. He felt the supernatural. He looked at this woman for a while with a cigarette in her hand. He was wondering, why is this magical energy here? After some time, he and Jessica arrived at their destination. She brought him to her and said that her family could definitely help. She opened the door and entered the house first, and our hero followed her. As soon as he entered there, he was shocked by what he saw there. He didn't even know whether to run away or not. He noticed an incredible number of werewolves in this place. They were all werewolves. The sheriff grabbed Jessica and rushed at her screaming, asking what she was doing. At the moment, the sheriff was in his wolf form, and he told Jessica that they could not interfere with the Magic Regulation Guild in this body. Sheriff needs to. At the moment, he didn't look like himself. Wells realized that the sheriff thinks that our hero is a member of that guild. Wells stood up for Jessica and said that he was not here and they didn't know him, and then asked, "Is the sheriff clear?" Then the white-haired werewolf calmed down and looked at Wells with displeasure. After that, he turned his back to him and growled loudly. His growl was piercing to the brim. He turned to the other werewolves and asked if they had heard all this. And so they sat our hero on a chair and began to interrogate him. They asked him what he would do. Wells replied that he would not answer questions, but he would be glad if he were brought up to date. The sheriff said the vampires are at the motel down the street and they're trying to take over their territory. Wells immediately remembered the motel from which strange things were coming. The sheriff said that they also brought a magician with them. He's been feeling his presence all week, or so they think. In addition, a small gang of those vampires killed 2 people. Wells asked the sheriff if he was sure that it was about her, and if so, then why didn't they do anything? The sheriff replied that the Venuta pack is not strong enough to challenge them, and it also interferes with the agreement, because none of the supernatural beings can attack each other until evidence is presented. A pack of werewolves is now powerless. If they enter into battle, the guild regulating magic will consider them aggressors. He also said that it is the damn guild that must maintain balance. But what in the end? Wells asked what kind of agreements were being discussed. He was thinking about the fact that here, vampires are killing people left and right, and the werewolves can't fight back because of the piece of paper that the Magic Regulation Guild handed them. Wells thought that if that girl was still at the motel, He could find her using his instincts. He began to scan the area, and indeed he succeeded, and the girl is there. The sheriff continued to talk and said that they claim that she herself went to them of her own free will. But this is a damn lie. He understood that she herself would never go to vampires in her life. Wells asked what would happen after they returned it. The white-haired werewolf said that as soon as Clara is free, they will contact Alpha Chester. He will send them the rest of the wolf pack with such reinforcements that they will deal with the bloodsuckers and drive them out of this city. Wells asked how vampires can be killed. The sheriff said that if you wound them with a weapon made of mardite, their regeneration will stop, but they don't have that. You can also break the skull or destroy the heart, then they will die immediately. Wells was holding a shotgun, so he asked what about firearms. The sheriff said that these creatures are very nimble, and it will be very difficult to strike them with an accurate blow. Wells understood that it probably just wouldn't happen, but to the sheriff's surprise, he agreed. Jessica asked our hero if he would help them. She really wanted this? Wells hit the table from his chair and said that he would return Clara while he reloaded the weapon. But he also said that he would need something in order for everything to be successful. After some time, the sheriff brought our hero to the room for prisoners. The sheriff said that this is the only soundproof room that is nearby. They also brought the pillows that he asked for. The Font also said that he doesn't know what exactly our hero is up to, but they don't have much time. Wells got to work. He said that he understood everything and said that it would take no more than 10 minutes. The sheriff began to leave this cell and said that he would give him 5 minutes. Wells looked at the sheriff who was leaving here in bewilderment. He was tense and thinking about what he was getting himself into. He understood that if he failed, then problems would come not only from the guild but also the werewolves would be disappointed in him, and the vampires would be angry with him. And on top of that, he doesn't know what kind of magician they have there. But he saw Clara, and now it's obviously very bad and she's sitting there in shackles. But Wells couldn't just stand by and do nothing. The following events take place in the very motel where the vampires were sitting. One of them turned to the magician and said that they had heard nothing from the werewolves at all, but he thought that they would immediately begin to act. The woman with the cigarette said that her observer is still working, and soon it will become more and more clear to them. She said that if someone tries to break in, she will be the first to know. And then the same events happened that took place at the beginning of this story. Our hero shot through the portal directly into the Mogu's head, and the vampires were shocked by this turn of events. They shouted that these were werewolves, but the shot was not visible from anywhere, and they did not understand how it happened. Wells all this time was in the cell where the sheriff left him. One target was eliminated. He has portals, teleportation, and a sense with which he can scan everything around him. Some time ago, he thought that these techniques must have other abilities to use, in addition to the basic ones, which the Magic Regulation Guild is not aware of. They think that space magic is not capable of combat, but this is not at all true. Wells understood that he first needed to learn to protect himself. What if he tried to use the portal in combination with various weapons? For example, throw a knife in front of you and it will fly 100 meters through the portal, while he made some sketches on paper to visualize it more clearly. But then he thought that it might be better to use a shotgun. And now he was going to try the same method on vampires and again created a small portal. One of the vampires who was wearing a hat told the other to warn the others. But that vampire didn't even have time to react because our hero shot him in the head through the portal. This happened right in front of another vampire, and that vampire also did not have time to react when a portal appeared behind him through which a shot was fired. Wells understood that he had a few seconds before other vampires appeared. He needed to quickly teleport Clara. It won't be easy to do this from such a distance, but just a strange instinct should help him. He began to create a portal behind her, but he found it difficult to grab her. She didn't have much whiz, and that's why she slipped out of his hands, but he still managed to do it. He did everything in such a way that she came out of the portal safe and sound, and he prepared these pillows especially for her. He thought that thank God that everything worked. It was quite difficult for him to move her at such a distance, especially if moving a person. One of the vampires heard a noise in the room and ran in to see what was happening there. Inspecting everything that happened there, he was shocked, and another portal appeared behind him and blew his head off. Wells felt that fatigue was making itself known to him, but he needed to end it. Now even more vampires gathered in one place. They panicked and shouted that they were being attacked. They would need to comb the area around them. Wells understood that while they were not confused, their speed would not help them. Wells created these portals and again shot them in the heads. This was very difficult for him, because he used up too much energy. He thought that none of them should leave here alive, even if he had to use all the mana. So he killed them one by one. One vampire was so scared that he simply fell to the ground and began to tremble. But even participation awaited him. A small portal appeared right next to his head, and he realized that the end had come for him. The sheriff stood with Jessica all this time near the cell in which Wells was. The sheriff was counting something, and Jessica was praying. And then suddenly Wells knocked on the door so that they would open the door for him. After they opened the door, they saw that Wells was standing there, all sweaty. He said that everything is ready. She is here. The sheriff stood in bewilderment, didn't understand what happened. Jessica ran straight to Clara and asked if she was okay. The sheriff counted 45 seconds. How is this possible, and what happened to the vampires? Wells looked at the sheriff and said in a calm voice that they were dead. That's all. He also advises sending firefighters to the motel. It's very hot there now. The sheriff asked what he was talking about. What did our hero do, and why does he feel absolutely no magic from him? He didn't know that all this time the bearing that is located on our hero's neck is constantly collecting this energy. Wells said the sheriff needed to hurry before the fire engulfed the entire area. Wells went to his car, and he thought that he had managed to collect a lot of valuable things from the vampires. He needed to go home and sort it out. When he was about to get behind the wheel, Jessica ran up to him and asked him to wait. Wells smiled and asked if she shouldn't be with Clara. Jessica blushed and said that she just wanted to tell him thank you. Wells said that there was no need for gratitude, but she quickly ran up to him and kissed him on the cheek. Wells did not expect this beauty to kiss him. He did not expect anything from her at all. She said goodbye to them and said that she would go to Clara because she needed help. Wells felt a little uncomfortable. At this moment, he said goodbye to Jessica and said that they would see each other again. Meanwhile, the sheriff, along with other werewolves, called Alpha Chester and said that he was calling him about the problem with vampires. It had been solved. Naturally, Chester asked what they did, but the sheriff replied that they did nothing, and he can boast that none of the pack intervened. Chester asked Arthur again what really happened. The sheriff replied that one person offered to help, but at the same time asked not to ask questions. And frankly speaking, he was not even sure if the sheriff knew his real name. Often asked if he was a werewolf or a magician, the sheriff said that it seemed to him that he had a tattoo of a magician. Only magical energy did not emanate from him. He may be a fae, but he doesn't look much like him. Chester was silent for a few seconds. Then he told Arthur that other vampires would not be happy about this turn of events. But if everything is as he said, then they will not be able to do anything. The sheriff said that in any case they owe it to that man. At that moment he looked at his daughter and niece. Chester said that he understood all this, but he was wondering, who exactly are they beholden to? He told Arthur to keep an eye on him. If he is a magician, then they cannot trust him. After this incident, Wells went to his home and then immediately took a shower. He thought about the fact that he had been showering for half an hour, but for some reason he still felt so dirty. He remembered where the murders that took place today and realized that he killed people today. He was very sad to understand this. He never wanted to be a killer. He tried to console himself with the fact that they were vampires, but still, I looked at my hands and asked myself why it was so easy. He had just begun to study magic and was already able to destroy an entire gang of monsters. He thought that if he were a villain, then in the whole world there would be no one capable of stopping him. Wells wondered if the Magic Regulation Guild really put such restrictions on people. But if he had followed the rules of that guild, Clara would still be in that motel. Wells knew there had to be a better solution to this problem. The window that covered the motel should have burned all the evidence against him. But nothing stops Langley from telling everyone what happened. Wiping his head after the shower, he thought that after all, he shouldn't have gotten involved with werewolves. If he had been smarter, he could have done everything without Jessica's knowledge. But he hoped to stay in this city longer. After these thoughts, he sighed heavily and thought that he would have to move. Now let's see how our sheriff is doing there. He went to one store. The font immediately turned to the man who was standing at the table and asked if they had arrived. An elderly, gray-haired man turned to the sheriff and said that they were waiting below. The sheriff put his hand on his head and really hoped that they hadn't sent a vampire. The sheriff's interlocutor said that they smelled like a magician and fairy. The sheriff came to those people and addressed them, calling them agents. They were just drinking some drinks. There was a blonde man and a woman with black hair. The man then greeted Alpha Langley. The man introduced himself and said that he was an agent named Ray Danforth. He also introduced the woman who stood next to him and said that this was his partner, Agent Felicia Black. The sheriff greeted them and said that the people were here to see them, and he hoped that these guys would help them deal with all this. While he shook the man's hand, and for some reason his hand was very black, a blonde man with green eyes asked the sheriff, "How is the motel cleaning going?" The gray-haired old man said that when he left, their people were still searching the area, but they had prepared several corpses for inspection. After that, the blond man looked at his partner and smiled. And so, they went straight to inspecting those bodies. A man with blonde hair carefully studied them. Having looked, he thought that all their wounds were approximately the same. The sheriff said that he hopes that they agree that it was not werewolves who did this. To be honest, they don't even know where exactly these injuries came from. The green-eyed man smiled and said that he was sure they would figure it out. He also turned to Agent Black and told her to come closer. The silent woman walked up to one of the dead bodies and began to use her power. Her hand lit up with a blue glow, and she was removing something from the dead man's head. Then she quickly raised her head up. Her eyes became white. She seemed to have entered a trance. A few seconds later, she came to her senses and was able to find out what that vampire was doing before he died. And then the silent woman finally spoke and said that this one was for you. He didn't see or hear anything. The sheriff was very tense at that moment. He understood that he had to be very careful with these people. Why did the woman continue to study the memories of the dead? She said that the next one heard the shots but died before he could react. The blond man asked his partner that one of them should have seen something anyway. The woman said that everyone was in a panic. None of them had a clear image. Then the male investigator thought that this must be an experienced killer. The sheriff was even frightened by what he had just found out. He said in a whisper that it was some kind of horror. But a man with blonde hair heard this whisper and asked the sheriff what did he just say. The sheriff said that he was talking about these wounds. They looked terrible. And his interlocutor said that this was true. He also said that they would have to stay in this town. The person who dealt with the vampires could be very dangerous. The sheriff said that he would arrange for them to be given a room. If they wanted, he could take them straight there now. But the investigator said that actually, if the sheriff was telling them the truth, they would be happy to interview a couple of people in the city. Considering that their flock is not involved in this case, there are two options for the development of events. Or an outsider who does not live in this city participated in all this, and then they have practically no chance of catching him. Or it could be one of the locals, and perhaps he was provoked into attack by the vampires themselves. The sheriff was very worried and said that he assures them that among the local residents there is no one capable of dealing with so many vampires alone. The investigators looked at each other and the man said that they would find out for themselves. The sheriff could not do anything and simply said that they could do as they wished. In the meantime, our hero decided to get busy to see what he took out of the vampire's lair. He had weapons, money, several hard drives and several more packs of ammunition. He looked at the gun and thought that it looked like ordinary ones, and there was nothing magical about them. But the cartridges are another matter. He noticed that they have silverite, mordite, and curite. On the forums, they say that these metals are good for dealing with werewolves, vampires, and fairies. This is quite a valuable find. It could definitely come in handy in the future, but there was something else there. When he looked at the thing, he realized that it was ceramic slabs. They must have belonged to the magician. He looked at them carefully and decided that he would deal with it later. For last, he left the most interesting things he could find in that lair. He had $100,000 in cash and several kilograms of gold. He was wondering how much these gold bars were worth. Wells knew how to distribute his finances well. Therefore, until he found out that he was a magician, he managed to accumulate a good fortune. Now he thought that he had invested a lot of money in this house. Therefore, part of the money earned should be set aside for unforeseen needs. In the worst-case scenario, this amount of savings will help him settle somewhere else. In addition, he needs to replenish his supplies of magical supplies. All sorts of different things from a household store are not very suitable. Well, I don't know what exactly these ceramic plates are needed for, but he was sure that the magician who owned them bought theirs at the local Venuta store. He thought that perhaps he would have to order some magical things. And suddenly his thoughts about all this were interrupted by the hum of a machine. He had just laid out all these things on the table and someone came to him. Wells quickly grabbed the bag and stuffed it into the nightstand. He understood that he needed to hide it all as soon as possible. When he looked out into the yard, he saw that those very familiar girls were standing there. He greeted them and asked if everything was okay with them. Jessica said they weren't sure if he would be here or not. Wells asked, "Did he really have to leave?" Jessica said, "Of course not, and she's glad he stayed." She told him that agents of the Magic Regulation Guild had appeared in the city and they were investigating. Wells. Of course he knew that sooner or later they would come, but he didn't think it would happen so quickly, and he asked, "Are they already in this city?" Lara said that she hoped that they did not disturb him with their visit. It was she who asked Jessica to bring her here. After that, she quickly ran up to our hero and hugged him, while telling him that she wanted to thank him very much. Wells was at a loss at this moment. He said that he could not do otherwise, but let him remember that he was not there. He was not involved at all. Jessica said that they understand this, but at the same time, they still have to thank him. So they brought him food from their cafe. They thought that he probably wouldn't be able to come there, so they brought it themselves. Wells remembered that he had not eaten for a long time, and just at that moment his stomach began to growl. He put his hand on his stomach and said that he seemed really hungry. Wells invited the girls home and told them to tell him in more detail about these clients who arrived in this city. Jessica said that her father saw them this morning. Apparently, one of them can talk to the dead, but they never learned information from the corpses. Wells thought about remembering this, and it's good that none of the vampires realized what he did. Clara said that they searched the motel all day, but absolutely everything was burned down, so most likely they won't find anything. Wells said he was grateful they told him all this. Jessica said that Alpha Chester is worried that our hero's help may cost them dearly, so dearly that they will not be able to pay. Wells began to eat the food, and then asked who this Alpha Chester was. Clara said that the sheriff is the Alpha in Venuta, but at the same time he is subordinate to the Alpha from the Midwest. So in a sense, by helping them, Wells is helping them Chester. Wells, like a true hero, said that he did not do all this for the sake of a reward. Clara asked that he really wouldn't tell them that they owe him something. Wells patted the girl on the head and said that they didn't owe him anything, and he would prefer not to talk about all this at all. Clara sweetly showed with gestures that her family would be locked up. The girls were very glad that such a noble man was in front of them. Meanwhile, investigators were inspecting the area and looking for something. One man said that a magical signature had been spotted, but he didn't think it would help. The blonde man said that the vampires had an aeromancer. Then his interlocutor said that no other noticeable signatures were found here. The investigator asked if there was anything else interesting. Then the man said that there was a list of things that the vampires had, but they were stolen. Then, the blonde investigator scratched his head and said that the Minneapolis Vampire Council would be furious, and he also said that Felicia was keeping an eye on these things. They will find them when the robbers start selling them. The silent woman nodded her head in agreement. He also turned to her and said that it seemed to him that the fire here was very strange, that I could call a cleanup squad so that no one would find any traces. But instead, ordinary people discovered it first. Felicia said the pack says they had nothing to do with the fire. The man with black hands said that absolutely everyone is hiding something from them. The werewolves pretend that they are not aware of all this, but he won't buy it. Then they looked into each other's eyes and fell silent for a few seconds. Then the blonde man began to use his magic, which was accompanied by a greenish glow. While doing this, he noticed some people. There was a blonde man who smiled and waved his hand. Felicia looked attentively at what was happening, as if it had become very cold around her, and steam began to emanate from her mouth. Then the male investigator straightened his tie with his black hands. It looks like they weren't gloves. He really does have such hands. Then he turned on his phone and started looking for the number. He found the address of Chase Hall. A short time later, they were already at Wells's door to check on him. Wells calmly opened the door after they knocked. When he looked at them, he immediately noticed that the man was emanating greenish magic, and the woman was covered with scales like a mermaid. Looking at all this, he understood that things were bad. He stood and said nothing, and they also stood in silence. They then opened their ID card, and it said that they were from the Magic Regulation Guild. Wells understood that these two were many times stronger than those vampires, and they still came to him. An investigator with blonde hair said that they were investigating a motel arson case, and asked, "Does our hero mind Leon answering a few questions?" Wells said that from what they said, he could use a lawyer. Felicia was a very cold woman, so cold that everything around her froze, and she said that our hero does not need a lawyer. She said it was quite rude and abrupt. Wells was starting to panic, and he said that it sounded like a threat. The investigators looked at each other. Their expressions changed. The male investigator approached our hero and turned to him, saying that the sheriff had told him about the vampires who settled here in Venuta. Wells tried to suppress his panic and said that he had no idea what they were talking about. The cold woman said that he would tell everything he knew about the fire right away. Wells said in anger, "What should he tell them? He only heard on the news about some incidents, that's all." The male investigator looked carefully at our hero with his green eyes, and then he sighed and said that in that case they would leave from here. And they actually turned around and just started going their way. Wells was all wet with sweat and thought that they had almost figured him out. She was trying to use some kind of magic. And so the male investigator turned to our hero and told him something final. He told him that Mr. Hall should not leave this judicial district. After all, he is a suspect in this case. Wells thought that he was in trouble after all. Wells immediately, without thinking twice, quickly collected his things and realized that he needed to get out of here. It seems that because of his resistance to the magic they tried to cast on him, he came under suspicion. Now it's a matter of time before new agents of the Magic Regulation Guild arrive here. He was very sad to realize that he was leaving Jessica here. How he wanted to stay in this town and much longer. But his life is at stake. He got into his car and immediately began to drive away. Sooner or later, someone would notice that he was missing. And then, the Regulation Guild will undoubtedly issue a warrant for his arrest. But if he stays away from busy highways and uses his instincts, there shouldn't be any problems. Wells drove past a red van and stopped next to him, thinking it was perfect. After some time, he went out into the building next to the van and was greeted by a bald man and asked how he could help. Wells was already used to this. He thought that looking at that car, he immediately realized that this man was a werewolf. After all, he noticed that he had the same magical signature as Langley. Wells approached the man and said he needed a new ID, and they told him that he could help with this. The bald man asked our hero if they knew each other. Wells put a gold bar on the table and said that he saw that his car was for sale and did not want to buy it along with the documents. The bald man took the gold bar and said that now he will see what he can do. We didn't have to wait long. After 10 minutes, our hero received a new ID and said that it should be enough to feel comfortable among ordinary people and among supernatural beings. Now Wells received another new name. Now he was named Denver Brown. Wells thought that he was now a professor. It looked like he would have to buy fake glasses. The bald man asked if he could help with anything else. Wells replied that he was looking for a place where he could buy books on magic. These were for his student. Then the salesman said that in that case he should go to Pearson's on the corner of 5th and Main Streets. But there are not too many such books there. Wells understood that there would not be many of them there because the Magic Regulation Guild liked to block information. He got into his new van and thought that he still had to go there tomorrow. Now it's too late. He wondered if the Langleys had discovered that he had disappeared. He felt terrible about it. Wells had already become attached to the sheriff, Jessica, and Clara. They were so kind and accommodating to him. Then he still thought about something and then decided that he still needed to tell them. The following events take place a few hours later. The same bald man who recently communicated with our hero has products on the shelves. He had already lost count several times, and he didn't even notice that a portal had formed behind him. The voice from the portal asked the man for forgiveness, and naturally the bald man was very scared. The voice from the portal asked if he could deliver a message to the Alpha of the Midwest, and the man who was looking at what was happening now asked who the hell was talking to him. Wells asked the man to tell Alpha that Clara's friend was safe. That man immediately called Alpha and told him all this information. As we can see from the clothes of this man, he looked like a native red American. Alpha also told his interlocutor on the phone not to look for this man. He is incredibly dangerous. Behind him stood 2 more werewolves, and he asked them if they had seen this friend of Clara. One of the werewolves said that they were with Alpha Langley when he joined his squad. Then the gray-haired man asked the wolf if he could recognize his smell, and the wolf said that of course he could. Then Alpha turned to the werewolves named Roy and John and said that he instructs them to find this friend so that this does not happen. Naturally, the turnover did not obey their Alpha and said that they would do everything. Meanwhile, the investigators bought themselves drinks and ate in the car to discuss some cases. The woman said that it turns out that they only have one lead. This is that strange guy Chase. She said that he could not be an ordinary person because he resisted her magic. The man told her that it was quite possible that protection could be imposed on him, but he himself did not know about it. The woman said that he was the most suspicious of everyone they interviewed, and besides, he lived on the same street, right next door to the vampire victim. Perhaps the bloodsuckers tried to attack Chase first, but were they stopped by his protector? In any case, they have no other leads, and they decided to go back to our hero's home. And so the investigators went straight to him and started knocking on the door. The woman with black hair said that the house was empty. Then her partner said that then they would do it quickly. The man used his magic and immediately opened the door instantly. Entering there, he realized that for some reason it was empty here, too empty. He had a feeling as if no one lived in the house. He began to scan everything with his magic to understand where our hero was. Was there anyone here at all? After scanning, he realized that there was nothing in the backyard either. But suddenly he felt something. He noticed a bearing on the floor that began to collect his magical energy. He walked up to this bearing and took it in his hands. It was interesting. The woman asked what he found. The man answered her that he was not sure, but it looked like a crude enchantment. The metal was ordinary, so it did not retain the imprints of magic. The woman said that it turns out that if Chase is not Mac, then he at least knows the magician. The man sighed and said that now it doesn't matter what happened here, because Mr. Hall will not return here again. The woman said that in this case she would quickly put his car on the wanted list. The male investigator examined the bearing with interest, and then he said he wanted to see what Alpha Langley had to say about this thing. Now back to our hero. He was sleeping in the parking lot in his new car. The sun was already high and it was shining right in his face. Wells woke up. He realized that it was already lunchtime. In the last few days, he fell asleep so soundly for the first time. Still, all that accumulated stress and worry makes itself felt. But for every second of delay, the sex agents get closer and closer to him. Wells hoped that the werewolf wasn't lying to him about the bookstore. And if he wants to continue to successfully hide, then he needs to learn more about magic. He immediately went to the bookstore and thought that this place looked very ancient. Although if you are a mighty checkmate, then you don't really need technology. As soon as our hero entered this bookstore and opened the door, he felt the smell of dust here. At first glance, it looked like an ordinary bookstore. He knew that he needed to look around here. Suddenly, he felt that he was catching a subtle magical signature. Perhaps there was a special department here? A gray-haired old man was sitting at the table, quickly leafing through some book. Magical energy emanated from him. Wells walked up to this old man and greeted him. The elderly man looked at the one who came to him. He was clearly not in a very good mood. He didn't say anything. He just turned around and continued to leaf through his book. Wells realized that this old man was not very talkative. It was probably better to leave him alone. Our hero immediately went to study what books there were. It was a rather large department, and half of it is fiction, and a pretty lousy one at that. Wells thought that maybe magic wasn't too different. He decided to see how much the book cost. When our hero saw that this book cost $200, he thought that they were probably mocking him. Even short stories cost at least $100. He was shocked by such prices. After some time, he found a book called Magical Defense, a treatise on defense. Finally, he found at least something related to magic. It's worth spending money on. He started leafing through this book to see what was inside, and noticed that there were a lot of interesting things there. Finally, that aggressive old man said that in order to read, you first need to buy a book. He doesn't have a library here. Wells thought that now he spoke, it even irritates him a little. He asked the seller if he had any more books for beginning magicians, only for those who had begun their training. The seller said that his interlocutor was too old for a beginner. Wells waved his hand and said that this was not for him. He was still a professor. Then the old man snapped his fingers and continued to look at the book he was reading. Very quickly, his magic immediately provided our hero with several books. Wells was surprised. This is real levitation, not like his, and he does it so naturally. These were books about learning to focus, an ancient encyclopedia about magical houses, and a world of portals for beginners. Wells accepted all these books, and the old man said that this was all he had. Wells said that then he takes these 4 books, the seller asked. Maybe he needs something else? Wells said nothing, and just waited for the old man to count the entire amount. It turned out to be more than $1,000 for the books. Wells gave him the money, and the old man accepted it, and we better put it in the cash register. And then there was an awkward pause, and the old man immediately continued reading his book, and our hero stood in front of him and looked at him. The old man looked at our hero and asked if he needed anything else. Irritated, Wells took his books and said that perhaps he didn't need anything else. Then he left that bookstore and thought that that old fool didn't even give him change. The next events take place 6 later. The wolf's face is looking for traces. These were the same werewolves that Alpha sent. One of them said that he could not detect any magical traces. On the other, the werewolf said that he did too. But how can he hide his physical scent like that, although the scent is weak? But this guy is somewhere here. They were near the bookstore where our hero had been to me so long ago. One of the werewolves said that he could ask that clerk. Maybe he had seen someone matching the description. But the other werewolf said that they didn't need extra attention. If the alpha wanted to make a fuss, he wouldn't have sent the 2 of them. The werewolves examined the area and tried to catch every detail. One of them sniffed and said that he parked here. It smelled like a pickup truck. Then he looked at the pillar with the cameras and said that he had a friend whom they could contact. We need to see if we can get the camera records for the last few days. The other werewolf thought about it and said that he needed to discuss this with Lucy first. They wanted to contact her. After all, hacking cameras is her specialty. Wells, meanwhile, sat in the car and studied the books he had bought. Studying them, he sighed heavily and thought that these were not very good books. One contains little information, and the other also contains very little of anything useful. The only thing he learned was about those ceramic plates that he took from vampires. They are called focus. It makes it easier to cast complex spells. However, the book does not say a word about how to create or where to buy a magic trick. Be that as it may, one cannot despair. He started his car, and he understood that in any case there should be at least one book capable of teaching him something. He must find another bookstore. He wants to study as much as this guy in the bookstore pissed him off today. Has he really not heard of such a word as hospitality, for example? The next events take place a day later. Wells has so far only met werewolves, vampires, and other magicians. He also found a fairy store where they sell crystals and herbs, although he didn't need all this. Wells bought himself glasses to look more like the professor, thinking that he had not yet found anything about the Dragonborn. He remembered that trainer from the fitness room and thought that Shahe was really unique in his kind, and he really hoped that he got out of this scrape alive. A lot of time passed, he still couldn't figure out what happened and why. Although maybe this is for the best, because who knows what he found there? And they won't say that in the news. After all, the dragon burned everything there with fire. Wells again came to another bookstore. There were new and old books. As soon as he entered this bookstore, he immediately felt an incredibly strong magical aura. He quickly saw who was emitting this strong magical trail, and it was some nice girl who stood near the bookshelves. Wells immediately began to wonder who she was. So cute. She seemed to be a student. Also, besides her, there are other people here, and he senses two more magical signatures. Apparently that elderly couple are also magicians, but once upon a time he would not have even paid attention to them. Wells decided to calm down and sighed. None of those present know that he is a criminal magician. As soon as he thought this, the old woman immediately drew attention to him. Wells immediately panicked. Why the hell is she looking at him so strangely? The old lady seemed to notice that he was starting to get nervous and smiled, and then greeted him with her hand. She also smiled and thought that it looked like she was just a friendly reader. This magic section in this store is better than the previous one. Although some books seem familiar to him, it seems that the choice here is not that big. Suddenly he heard some grumbling behind him and looked around. The girl he saw immediately as he entered the store grumbled something in a dissatisfied tone. Wells approached her and said that she must be reading Magical Defense. This is a strange book. He also said that he doesn't know for whom it was written, but I'm sure that half of the text there is complete nonsense. The girl laughed and said that she thought she was the only one who didn't understand anything, and spent the whole day following her in the hope of understanding what was written there. Wells said that he could help her with this, especially since he was just looking for books for beginning magicians, although the one in her hands was not suitable. The sweet girl asked, "Is he really looking for a student?" Wells said something like that. He believes that she herself is someone's student. The girl said that it's the other way around, she's trying to avoid it. Archmage Fane is always trying to make her his student, but she doesn't want to. She doesn't like him. Wells was surprised that the Archmage wants to get this girl as his student, which means she is somehow important. He asked her, how does she want to avoid becoming a disciple? The green-eyed girl said that you just need to make your personal project, a healer with this easier, but you still need to learn basic things, for example, applying shields. Wells said that it sounded interesting. He also said that his name was Denver Brown, and he was a professor. He was pleased to meet her. She happily gave her name and said that her name was Gail Hargrave. Wells suggested to her that maybe they should work out together, although he is not sure how much time she has. She said that she has many years for this. After all, no one forces healers to do anything. Then he asked her if there was a list of what he could learn. He could check his reference material. And after some time they sat down at the same table and Wells picked up the book and looked at it. He said that she should learn telekinesis, creating magic tricks, charm, and enchantment. This is quite a large amount of information. It will take time to learn it. The girl said that there was, after all, Wells said that with the help of healing, she could probably carry out powerful attacks. The girl replied that healing heals and not about that. Our hero said that it depends on how exactly it is applied, and she probably studied at the medical faculty in college. The green-eyed beauty said that she did not go to college, she had the education of a magician. I was like ordinary people. Her parents sent her to the best academy, although everything there is old-fashioned, but all influential families study there. Our hero thought that she should be a daughter, and that's great. Wells said that in this case, they will postpone talking about attack magic for now. He quickly wrote something on a piece of paper and said that when she has free time, let her look at the signaling cascades of blood coagulation and neurochemistry. He also said that he doesn't know how healing magic works, but if she can choose one thing and strengthen it, then everything else will fall out of balance and upset the balance. The girl became interested in his words. It seemed to her that he was thinking something unconventional. She said that it would be very useful. Our hero said that he was glad to hear it. They had been sitting there for quite some time. Wells told his interlocutors that it was time to finish, and that was enough for today. Then the green-eyed girl put her hand on our hero's hand and said that Professor Brown had helped her a lot, and she also asked if they could meet again, for example next Friday. Wells did not expect this from her and said that perhaps they could meet. In any case, he would think about it. The following events take place the next day. Wells thought that he was really lucky that he had found a novice magician. Now he can learn the basics of magic under the pretext of helping her. But he was in any case helped her, not only because of this, she seems like a kind girl. Well, I thought that perhaps he should check out another bookstore in the hope of finding at least something he needed. He went to that bookstore and immediately chose the books he needed. The woman seller greeted him and asked if he only takes these 2 books. Wells thought that she seemed like another werewolf and said that he was taking this light reading for his student. She put these books in a bag for him and then looked into his eyes and asked if he found everything he was looking for. She said this in such a tone that he somehow felt uneasy, but he said that he had found everything and thanked her. She smiled and said that they have another rack right behind it. If there is time, he can look at something there. Wells said in a friendly manner that he was grateful to her for this, but he was already late, so he would be in a hurry. The woman said that she understood everything and wished him a good day. Wells felt paranoia developing in him, and he needed to get out of here. He was very worried and thought that it was a big mistake and to linger here. He had already begun to think that the help of that girl could turn out badly for him. He walked to his van and thought about how he needed to get out of here quickly. While he was thinking about this, he accidentally looked into the bag of books and noticed some kind of note there. He pulled out this note and saw someone's number there. It was the number of Alpha Chester, who asked our hero to call him. Now let's see what Chester is doing. He was already near that hacker girl who told him that it was good that his guys turned to her. For her, working with cameras is easier than a steamed turnip. I often asked her if she had found him. She said that it was easy to find him. A couple of hours ago, she found him on street security cameras and found out his location. But if his guys continue to try to track him this way, they will always be one step behind. The better question is, where is he now, but where exactly is he going? Chester didn't like these long conversations and said that Lucy quickly told him what she meant. The girl said that she was leading to this. Chester's guys did a lot of dirty work. For example, they interrogated the sellers of the store where he stopped. The one he was looking for was too interested in books. After all this, she hacked cameras located at major exits from the state. And eventually she realized that he was going somewhere to the south. Meanwhile, Chester was thinking that she was doing a very good job. Lucy said that in general, without going into details, Roy had compiled a list of likely stops. And so she found the very store where our hero had just bought books. She said that Professor Denver Brown was spotted in a bookstore owned by a werewolf, and Chester's boys are already heading there. Chester told her to tell them not to make contact, let Mr. Brown come to them himself and not them to him. Lucy smiled and said that after all, this thought finally dawned on the chief. It was already late evening. Wells stood near the telephone booth with the same number in his hands that he received in the bookstore. He was thinking about what the hell was happening to him. He didn't know what to do, and was it really worth calling Alpha Chester? It seemed to him that he must have gone crazy, otherwise there was no way to explain it. On the other hand, if Alpha Chester was able to track him, that means he's doing something wrong. If he calls him, then at least he can decide what to do next. Wells pulled himself together and called that Alpha, often immediately picking up the phone and thanking our hero for calling him. He first called him Mr. Brown and then said, maybe it would be better to call him Mr. Hall. Our hero asked what he wanted. Chester said that even though he knows that Mr. Brown would like to remain not involved in this, Chester is still indebted to him for saving his great niece Clara. But Venute is not the only territory where the vampires decided to cause unrest. Wells told his interlocutor that he was not a mercenary. Chester said that he did not know who he was, but he knows what Mr. Brown is capable of, and in return, he can offer a substantial reward, such as information about the Magic Regulation Guild. Money is not a problem for him, but information could be useful, especially about magicians and their structure of society. He often said that this can already be considered accomplished. He has connections with one of the experts in the field of magic, and he can arrange a meeting for them. Wells asked his interlocutor what should he do in this case. Chester replied that there are 4 cities that the vampires are targeting. They are abusing political rules to reduce his influence. Wells asked if these were really 4 different cities. He himself thought that he didn't know if he could figure it all out. After all, there are no guarantees that he will be able to pull off such a trick again. To be honest, he was actually lucky that time since these agents almost caught him. Wells asked his interlocutor by what time he should do this. Then he often asked, does it mean he still agrees to do it? Wells said that if he often arranged a meeting with a magic expert, he would think about his proposal, but he needed to find out exactly how he found it. Chester said that his guys had been tracking Mr. Brown by scent for a long time, but they would not have been able to find it if Mr. Brown had not looked into all the bookstores while driving south. Wells ground his teeth at that moment. He realized that of course he was so predictable. Chester said that in a nearby street in a trash can, they left a folder for him. There, he would find information and everything he needed to know about vampires. Wells said that he would announce his decision soon. Chester said that he would wait. The following events take place the next day. Wells found that folder and began to examine it. He noticed that there was a whole encyclopedia there. He read what was written there and thought that Alpha Chester was well prepared. But between some of these cities, the distance is almost 1,300 kilometers. Such work cannot be done quickly. Then he remembered that he was, after all, a magician and could teleport. After these thoughts, he went somewhere further into the forest and thought that he could try to teleport himself, but no more than 150 minutes. On the one hand, he has gravitokinesis. With its help, he can develop incredible speed of movement. Only he had never tried this before, but in theory it should work. He began to fly into the air, and he began to succeed, and he was even happy. Well, as soon as he flew a little higher, he lost his balance and almost fell. Then he managed to react and thought that it was quite difficult to control this. He made another attempt, and this time he did not have time to react and flew off, hitting his back against a tree. It was quite painful. He understood that in the future it could be useful, but not now. Now he needs something that will help him with stabilization. After thinking for a few seconds, an idea came to his mind and he realized that it could help him. Now let's see what the investigators who are looking for our hero are doing. They followed in his footsteps and tried to scan the area to find at least some evidence and clues. The woman asked if I had found her partner at least something. The man replied that there was something ahead. They needed to check the ravine. They walked a little further and noticed some kind of hole into which they immediately looked. The man said that it was hidden quite well. In the pit itself, there was a car that was already covered with leaves. The woman opened the door and looked at what was inside, and it looked like everything had already been cleaned out. The man said that considering that this car was here recently, it means they are getting closer and closer. Wells got hold of a motorcycle and was already racing on it, picking up speed more and more. He had a plan that was supposed to work, but he still didn't know if it would work. Having gained great speed, he began to use his magic. It seems he started to succeed. He thought that this was what he needed. Now that he used gravitokinesis on a motorcycle, he will be able to move between werewolf cities in the blink of an eye. Now that the issue with transport has been resolved, he must inspect one of the vampire nests. Wells wanted to find out what he would encounter there, and after some time he arrived at the place. He recalled that Alpha Chester had given him the coordinates of all the local alphas, but it would be wiser for him to avoid unnecessary contacts. Now he needed to find the location of the nest. He used his magic scanner and began to inspect the area. If you believe the information that was given to him, then this lair should be somewhere nearby. Looking around, he finally saw that there was clearly something in the local cinema. He counted 9 vampire signatures. It is quite possible that this is their lair. He also noticed that there was one earth mage there. The building was full of magical shields. He examined everything even more carefully and realized that as far as he could judge, they only existed on Earth. So if he doesn't go inside, he can essentially easily bypass all of their defenses. The only problem lies in their magician. His magical shell seems reliable, and our hero would like the same protection for himself. But vacuum enchantments will be impossible with it. It seems that such work will cause him a lot of trouble. He was thinking about abandoning the deal with Chester. Suddenly, Wells saw something that surprised him very much. He thought what the hell this was. This was the 10th vampire, and he moved faster than a bullet. And then he remembered some things. In Venuda, he was never able to properly find out the real speed of the vampires because he attacked them from an ambush. But when he saw how quickly this vampire moved, he thought that it was terrifying. A chill ran through his entire body, and he also noticed that this vampire was carrying something. Having looked closely, he noticed that it was a child. Seeing this, he began to panic. Such things made him very angry. He thought that these vampires were just bastards. That magician stands absolutely calm. He just watches as the vampire drags this child. Out of anger, he thought that he would not allow them to get away with this and sent a message to Chester that he agreed. Wells got on his motorcycle and moved on. He needs to come up with a new strategy. This time, he should be more careful and more lightning fast. He needed such a strategy so that the agents of the Magic Regulation Guild could not track him. Wells wanted to think about it, but the phone rang in his pocket. Today was Friday, and he received a reminder that he had to meet with Gail. Now he realized that he was late and quickly arrived at his destination and immediately began communicating with his new acquaintance. She was holding some round thing that looked like a plate in her hands. Wells asked her to look at this thing. Looking at this magical thing, he thought that it looked like a very neat telekinesis trick. Then he looked at the girl and said that Gail did very well. The girl with green eyes thanked our hero for bringing all these educational supplies. and she also said that she had probably already reviewed a dozen plates to achieve the correct design. Wells looked into her eyes and smiled and then said, "Is she ready to check it out?" The girl took the plate in her hand and began to look at it, thinking about what she wanted to try. She began to pour her magic into this thing and everything seemed to start working. Gail was even surprised that it worked for her, but she was not sure if she was doing everything right. Wells told her not to stop and to continue. She continued pouring magic and held the thing over the book. And then magical energy began to emanate from the book, which could be easily noticed. Wells jumped up from his chair and said that she had succeeded. The girl also rose to her feet and said that it was true. She thanked Professor Brown for helping her and hugged him. Wells smiled and said that it was too early to thank him. This was just the beginning. They still had a lot of work ahead. The girl was a little upset, and then told him not to be such a bore. Wells said they were done for the day and then asked if they could meet at the same time next week. The girl was delighted with our hero, and she said that of course she wants to meet next week. Wells immediately after that went to his motorcycle and thought that he still had a couple of hours left. In a hurry, he put all his things into his backpack and did not even notice that he had not closed the backpack completely. He needed more supplies and he seemed to know how to deal with the vampire nest. If everything goes according to plan, tomorrow there will be nothing left of these bloodsuckers. He didn't want everything to look the same as in the motel, so he immediately abandoned the guns, but he has something less effective in mind. This thing is called thermite, a mixture of metal oxide and aluminum. It is usually used for welding rails, and when ignited, it can burn at temperatures above 2,000 degrees Celsius. This is twice the temperature of hot lava, and more than enough to melt the faces of bloodsuckers. It's easy to make termite. You can even make it from available items. You need to scrape off some rust from the old pipe, grind the aluminum foil into dust. You need to mix it 3-to-1 and pour the contents into a soda can. And so he succeeded. Now you have learned how to make homemade grenades at home. Write down before they take the recipe. Thus, he made quite a few of these cans. He decided to put them in different hiding places in order to move faster and not carry them with him. Now we need to find some very heavy object. Looking around, he noticed that there was a huge stone lying nearby and it would be just right. Meanwhile, the vampires were sitting in the cinema watching a movie about vampires. One of them said that the movie just sucks. One of the vampires asked the other if there was any blood left from that girl. The interlocutor of this vampire said that most likely all the blood from her was drunk dry. Then the vampire realized that someone needed to go hunting. While they weren't communicating, a small portal appeared right next to them through which a small can of Coca-Cola fell. But it was an explosive. The explosion was quite strong, and the vampires were suddenly ignited. After the explosion occurred there, the fire safety sensors went off. Other vampires reacted and came out of other rooms to understand what had happened. They smelled smoke and understood that there was a fire. Meanwhile, our hero continued to act. One of the vampires saw that a small portal appeared behind the other vampire. Something fell there, and he tried to say something. But he didn't have time to say anything because the explosion happened instantly and burned the vampires. Wells saw that everything was working. He managed to destroy several. Now we need to not slow down and continue to attack. He continued to do his job. He quickly lit a fuse in each of the jars and created portals underneath them. Wells was very serious and thought that he would not give them even a second to think. Therefore, he decided to deal with them in one fell swoop, and real chaos began in that cinema. The first one simply burned down and they did not understand who could have done it. As it all happened, I sat and watched a great film. Suddenly he smelled smoke and quickly stood up from the place he had just been sitting in. Because of the smoke, the fire alarms went off in the room where he was sitting, and he thought that they were under attack. When he ran out into the corridor, he noticed that terrible things had happened here. He thought about why his observers did not work. Wells concentrated. Now the most difficult thing was the earthbender's turn. He needed to start the second step. He still knows little about the capabilities of magicians. Perhaps not termite, not the field will be able to penetrate such a thick shield. So he came up with a method that would definitely work. He approached the stone and lifted it into the air with the help of levitation. He thought that whether he was a magician or not, but first of all, he was still a man. And his reaction is also human if he lifts the stone to such a height. And then it will create a portal at the very last moment when the stone was almost supposed to land. Then exactly what you expect from it should happen. The magician looked around and thought that he had to find the one who did this. And then a portal appeared right above him. And from that portal, a stone flew right onto the magician's head. And then the cobblestone hit so hard and fast that not a single shield could save you. She looked around and tried to find at least one living vampire. But it looks like there are no more survivors left there. Wells sighed and sweated. One nest destroyed, 3 more to go. Wells gathered his things and got back on the motorcycle. And so, an hour later, Wells sat on the roof of one of the buildings and watched a strong fire. He drank a soft drink and thought that those vampires didn't have a chance. Meanwhile, Chester was sitting next to a girl who was clicking something at the computer and asked her if she had any reaction from vampires. The girl pulled out no reaction from her mouth. No, and it looks like that guy is doing his job cleanly. Alpha Chester was surprised that he had already dealt with another lair. A text message arrived. It was written there that it had been cleared. Chester was even more surprised because the second nest had already been cleared. He didn't understand at all. How is this possible? What kind of power does this man have? Wells was not going to stop and decided that it was time to tackle the third nest. Inspecting this area where there were supposed to be vampires, he decided to first count their number. Scanning the area, he counted a dozen vampires and one well-protected mage. But there is someone else there, and our hero began to take a closer look at who it was. He saw two silhouettes, but it didn't look like they were someone supernatural. As it turned out, these were ordinary people, a man and a woman. They were shackled. Wells didn't understand how the hell he could get them out of there without revealing himself. Callum got off his motorcycle and began to walk from side to side, thinking about what he should do. If he gets them out of there and takes them with him, he will probably reveal his identity. Of course, he can't throw them either. It turns out that if he saves them, he needs to deliver them to a place where the werewolves can quickly get to. He started scanning the area again and noticed that there was a fast food place a couple of blocks away and he could leave those two there. But before that, he needs to destroy the nest of vampires, and only then he can take them from there. Wells understood that he needed to act quickly. Firstly, to find out whether there was a weak spot in the nest. For example, where many vampires have gathered in one place, it will be possible to destroy them all at the same time. Or perhaps there are places where there is something flammable. And there really were such things. It was ideal for an attack. The first point is over. Secondly, you need to prepare the termite. 6 cans will be enough to defeat them all. Well, now all that remains is to add a drop of portal magic. He quickly lit all the wicks on the jars and sent them into the portals. Then there were many explosions that destroyed those terrible creatures. A man and a woman who were in captivity heard explosions. The woman asked what it was. The man looked around and realized that it looked like the fire alarm had gone off there, and everything was burning there. They began to panic because this place was filling with smoke. They urgently needed to get out. The man tried with all his might to open the door, but nothing worked. But at that moment, a portal appeared behind him. He and the woman tried to open the doors in a panic, but nothing worked. Wells came through the portal to them and asked them if they were okay. Naturally, the two guys were very scared. The man asked our hero who he was. Wells told them to turn to face him and close their eyes. He said that they were from here, but they both must trust him. With one word of his finger, he freed them from the shackles. The man and woman realized that he might want to help them, and they agreed to do what he said. Wells created a portal that placed himself and those two people. Then he created a portal in another place. It seems it was some kind of bathroom. He created a portal quite high near the ceiling, and the woman and man fell to the ground rather unpleasantly. Wells said that she left slightly awkwardly. Then he told them that they were in the restroom and should wait here until they came for them. The woman asked if he would just leave like that, and the man said that they didn't even know who he was. Wells turned around and said that he was nobody, and even if they forgot his voice. The woman asked how long they should wait here. Wells said that he would not answer any more questions. He wished them good luck and went out through the portal. They put these two in front of him. They had so many questions. He immediately remembered himself when he first encountered all this. Wells hoped that Alpha Chester could take care of them. He sent him a message that the third nest had been destroyed. He left 2 captives in a stubborn cafe down the street. Later, he was going to make sure that they were not harmed. Wells saw that Chester had sent him a message that the vampires were leaving and the cancellation of the 4th nest. Wells realized that it looked like they finally understood, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. Although he trained for a long time, even then he spends too much vis and gets tired quickly. If I had to clean out another nest, it would be very difficult. He understood that it was worth it. He did it not only for the sake of the deal with Alpha Chester, he also wanted to do this so that those 2 innocent people could move on with their lives. Well, now let's see what happened a couple of minutes before, Alpha Chester asked. How does he manage to pull all this off? Sitting next to him was a white-haired man who said that it seemed he had access to the teleportation network of the Magic Regulation Guild. And if not, then it must be the work of fairies. Their magic is different from his magic and full of secrets and mysteries. Chester asked Lucy if she had any ideas, and the girl said that he hardly uses his phone. She tried to track him, but because of this, she could not. So she asked the boss for forgiveness. Chester turned to the white man and said that, Let him imagine if he could move his people at the same speed. Then, that white-haired man told Chester that he doubted that the guy would reveal his methods. Chester said that maybe they should offer him something in return. Something much more than talking to him, that is, to Jasper, the same man with white hair who sits next to him. Lucy said that she didn't think he had anyone working as a scout under him. Maybe he would be glad to have a girl on hand who understood technology. Chester asked her if she was going to be a volunteer, and if he were in her place he would try to avoid this, considering what kind of relationship she has with the Magic Regulation Guild. Lucy said that she can work for the guild, but in fact they don't care about non-mages like her, so Chief, you can consider it a done deal. Suddenly the phone rang. Chester said it was just in time and immediately picked up. A vampire called him and asked Chester to call them back. These targets directed attacks on their nests is a violation of the agreement. The Magic Regulation Guild will not just leave it like that. Chester said that he has no idea what his interlocutor is talking about now. None of his werewolves even appeared near his nests. The vampire angrily said that he was taking people away from Chester's territory. So let him recall his own. Chester said that he was glad to hear this. He even smiled at that moment. The vampire said that he often didn't even think that he would leave it just like that. He still has no idea who he hired to deal with him. But when he finds out about this, they will regret that the Magic Regulation Guild did not get to them first. And now the investigators were already at the scene. The man said how much work he had done. The female investigator asked her partner, "Does he really think that the same person did it?" Then the man ran his black hand across the floor and said that it was definitely the same person. The method is of course different, but otherwise it's all the same. He doesn't know who it is, but every minute he becomes more and more dangerous. One of those people who searched everything here found something interesting. He immediately gave this item to the investigator, and he began to look at this thing. As it turned out, it was the bearing of the same suspect. True, he still cannot understand why he needs these bearings. This is clearly his calling card. While he was saying all this, the woman who was standing next to him touched his shoulder to draw attention to herself. And then he asked for forgiveness and asked the person who gave him this bearing to move away a little, because his colleague cannot speak in front of other people. Then, that man, of course, walked away, and the fair-haired investigator said that he had already forgotten that other magic besides him had immunity even to her siren abilities. He asked her what she thought. The woman said that she was tormented by her eyesight, and that the destruction of the first nests was more of a spontaneous decision. The vampires must have stolen his crush or something, and he did not use weapons on purpose but by chance. And now, she showed him another little thing that was almost melted in the bag. The man said it looked like a planned ambush. The woman said that they should talk to Alpha Chester. All these incidents with vampire nests took place on his territory. They were thinking about Alpha Chester, Antoine Levine, or maybe even Raweb, the king of the local fairies, that is, the sirens. The man said that he knows this, given such a unique style of killing. Maybe Fairy has important information. Without thinking twice, they immediately went to Chester. Chester greeted the agents. He invited them to sit down, and the blond man thanked him and said that he believed that Chester already knew why they came here. The werewolf man said absolutely calmly that of course he knows. It must all be because of that terrible incident with the avalanche vampires. He also said that he knows that in the past they had quarrels and misunderstandings, but he assures them that he had nothing to do with this massacre in the nest, and they can resolve all their disagreements with Levine using the special procedure of the Magic Regulation Guild. Naturally, the investigator did not trust him. He thought that this was just a memorized phrase. He then said that he then thought that Chester would have no problem answering a few of their questions, just to clarify. Suddenly, Chester's phone rang on the table. The gray-haired man immediately took the phone and asked for forgiveness. He turned away and said that he would call him back later. He had visitors now. Then he turned off the phone and sat down at the table asking where they stopped. The follower continued his conversation. He began to ask questions that interested him. Meanwhile, our hero was annoyed that Chester just hung up the phone like that. A whole hour had already passed since then. Wells was near the fourth locker. He divided and hid all the loot from the vampire nests in 5 different places, each of which can be easily reached by using teleportation. And also, if he was suddenly captured, they would have no evidence against him. Wells is constantly at home about this, and suddenly Chester called him. He told our hero that he called exactly at the moment when agents of the Magic Regulation Guild came to him, and they were unpleasantly surprised by how our hero dealt with the nests. Wells smiled and asked, "What about Chester?" Then the white-haired man said that it seemed to him that his interlocutor did everything so well that it could not be better. Wells asked his interlocutor whether he had given out information about him. Chester replied that of course he didn't tell anything about him, Only the agents were upset that he knew practically nothing, and they realized that he had no leads. However, if our hero is somehow suddenly identified, then Chester will not be able to help. Wells replied that he thought so. Chester also said that now he wants to talk about payment, and he wants to introduce him to two people. The first person is the magical expert they were talking about before, and he can call him Harry. And the second one is an information technology specialist she asked to be called Coin. Wells said with a smile that at least some of them had a sense of humor. Then he said that it was the same coin that made their telephone conversations not bugged. The girl snatched Chester's phone and said that it was really her, and she wanted to say that she was a big fan of the way he kills, and that's all. Also, this nice girl said that she thought he might need some technical support. Wells said that everything was true and said that she was working for Chester. The girl said that she works there part-time, she also does something there, but she would not say that he is a super boss for her. Wells thought that he was not sure that he could trust her, but her skills could be useful to him. Wells told her to text him her number and he would think about it. Em looked at Chester to the girls and said that that guy wanted her number, then asked if he was jealous. The white-haired man grabbed the phone from the girl and told her to stop flirting. He lit a cradle and told our hero if he wanted information about magicians. He also said that he was just scanning several grimoires. Lucy, that is, the coin will send him the files and his contact information. Wells said that would be great and thanked the man. And finally, Chester got his phone back in his hands. Finally, Chester wanted to warn our hero about something. Antoine Levine is the owner of Minneapolis, and he is very evil. It is very important that he does not catch our hero. After all, this is the most dangerous vampire Chester knows. After some time, Wells sat at his laptop and thought that a friend of Chester's magician had brought simply amazing grimoires. They are all handwritten with detailed descriptions, the kind you won't find in bookstores. Although apparently he knows as much about spatial magic as our hero, there is practically nothing in these books. Evening had already come. Wells was thinking that he should probably call this coin. As always, she sat at the monitors and studied or searched for something. Wells called her. She was surprised that he decided to contact her so soon. The sweet girl thought that she really liked her. She picked up the phone and greeted him. She also asked if he had decided to accept her offer. Our hero told her that he had a job for her, but first he needed to find out how much it would cost him. The girl said that for $50 she would be his all night. It sounded quite meaningful. Wells felt some awkwardness at that moment, but everyone answered that she was joking. Then she said that she could send him a price list for which she was working with Chester. Although, to be honest, the price depends on how interesting the task is. Because ordinary people in the supernatural world are given the most boring and tedious jobs. Wells just realized that she was an ordinary person. He said that he thought that she was a werewolf. The girl replied that she was an ordinary person. Her parents were magicians, but she was not so lucky. She then quickly sent him a message with prices for services. It said her real name was Lucille Harper. Wells said it looked like she sent him her real name by mistake. Lucy replied that she intended to send him her real name because she was tired of this joke with the coin. And besides, the situation with her work is such that Chester protects her, or she's finished. Because the agents of the Magic Regulation Guild will not be stopped by a fake name. Wells asked her if she really trusted Chester's protection. Considering how much he needed Wells's help, he thinks that he is not that strong. Lucy said with a smile that so be it, and she will not convey his words to Chester. She began to tell him that Chester is almost of particularly royal blood. He can kill dozens of people. As punishment for this, he can only be scolded, and that's all. Probably only archmages and the head of vampires can stand on equal terms with him. Wells asked her what kind of vampire head it was. It looks like Antoine is acting. He thought that when Chester warned about him, Wells didn't pay much attention to it. But if this vampire is on the same level as archmages, then you need to be much more careful. Wells turned to Lucille again, but she told him that he could call her Lucy. Wells asked if she could find the pair that he saved from the nest. She asked, "Are we talking about those people that he left in the fast food restroom?" She said that of course she didn't want to say anything, but she didn't think that everything was all right with them, because they were found by agents of the Magic Regulation Guild. Wells realized that he should have realized that it was better to deal with them himself. Did she also say that she would find out more about them for him? And she asked how he wanted to pay her for her work. Wells said that he could leave a gold bar in the cash as an advance payment. 2 Kior will do. Lucy was very happy and said it was awesome. He just bought himself the best night of his life. Wells felt awkward again. He thought that this girl was just something. The following events take place the next day in a bookstore. Wells continued to study magic with that girl under the pretext of being a professor, and somehow he constantly helped her. He told her not to stop. She almost succeeded. The girl thought that this was very amazing. This thing in her hands glowed brightly, and an old woman approached them. This glow bothered her a little, and she coughed demonstratively so that the guys would pay attention to her. Wells said that it seemed like it was time to finish. The girl asked where our hero found this enchantment. For a long time, she could not cope with the spell of light. Wells said that an acquaintance of one of his friends recommended good books. The girl started to get ready and told Wells to thank him for her. And this telekinesis trick just works great. Wells asked the girl how her experiments with healing were going, and he asked if she remembered how he advised her to study something for the attack, and asked how she was doing. The girl replied that she read about it and conducted an experiment on crickets, and with the help of inverted circulation using an asymmetrical system, she was able to cause damage to them. Wells didn't show it and spoke as if he understood everything, but he himself was thinking about what the hell she was saying. She also said something else. Our hero thought that sometimes when he talks to her, he can't get rid of the nasty feeling that he's stupid. He knows that he began studying magic later than everyone else, but it was still noticeable how quickly a trained magician can grasp new activities. He looked at this beauty and thought that she was simply incredible. She also said that as soon as one of the crickets touched her finger, she screamed in fear. Meanwhile, important meetings began elsewhere, with several important people sitting around a round table. Chester said that they specifically agreed to hold this meeting at night precisely because of the vampire, but at the same time he also has the impudence to be late. Another white-haired man with a beard said that he was sure that the vampire would arrive soon. Chester said that it was better that it was so, and the vampire was just heading there. After all, it was his idea. And finally, Antoine Levine came to them. This is the head of the Minneapolis Vampires. As soon as Chester saw him, he immediately almost turned into a werewolf. He said that just look who finally deigned to appear. Alpha Chester is the leader of the werewolves from the Midwest. The vampire suddenly turned into bats in some kind of fog and began to approach the table. He abruptly approached there and told Chester that this mongrel should watch his tongue. They clearly didn't like each other very much and almost came to blows right on that table. Among them was a man with blue skin. He ordered everyone to calm down and hit the table with his fist. It was King Ravib, the ruler of the Fae from the Midwest. He said that they all had better get down to business. Chester, who was already ready to rush into battle, said that he agreed with him, and the vampire also sat down in his place. Then, the gray old man, who was an archmage named Jeanri and was a representative of the Magic Regulation Guild, said that it was great that they had gathered here by the right of his status as an archmage. He declared their meeting open. And this elder turned to the gentleman and said that a killer was operating on their lands, and they needed to do something about it. After some time, our hero arrived at another place where he had not been for a long time. He arrived again in the same town called Venut. Arriving home, he saw that everything was in order with the house, and he was surprised that Helia of Magical Regulation had not yet unhooked his house. Most likely, Langley took care of this. Probably thought that he might return here and decided to scare off the Magic Regulation Guild. He thought that he would like to thank them. He used his magic to discover his things that he had hidden. Wells used his power and pulled out 2 bags from the ground. He looked inside and realized that everything was fine. Everything was safe and sound as he had left it. Wells wanted to take as much gold with him as he could, but some of it would have to be left here. Now that he hired Lucy, and the costs of magical things continue to rise, it would be nice to replenish the wallet. He thought that everything seemed to be in order. He got what he needed, and now the most reasonable option would be to leave here as far as possible. He again went to his motorcycle, all on it, and began to leave. He wanted to drive through this town at full speed without saying hello or goodbye to anyone. But a few minutes later, Callum was asking himself, why is he here? And then he calmed down and just wanted to take a peek at what was going on and how they were doing. Wells used his magic and saw that it looked like the whole family was now in the cafe. Jessica asked Clara to bring steaks from the freezer. Clara said that she would do everything now and immediately went to the kitchen. The sheriff told Jessica that Clara seemed cheerful, but she still had nightmares at night. Jessica said that sometimes this happens, but she thinks that it is because of the vampire shepherd that she hardly remembers anything. On the other hand, who knows how much it can be imprinted in the memory? The officer put his hand on Jessica's and said they were lucky they were able to get her back so quickly. Jessica remembered our hero and thought that they were very lucky. Suddenly, she smelled something and asked her father if he could smell it. She quickly ran out into the street and saw only our hero's motorcycle passing by. She didn't fully understand whether it really was Wells. Our hero thought that he was almost caught. If he wants them to be safe, then it is better to stay away from them. If he is close to them, then it is a matter of time before we have guild agents. Wells was in touch with his assistant. She asked him through the earpiece if he wanted to know where the teleportation circles of the Magic Regulation Guild were. Wells asked if it was difficult. The girl said that it was not particularly difficult. She was just surprised that he didn't know this, because they thought that he moved with their help. Wells said that was a good guess. But wrong. The girl said that she would send him a list of public circles. You said that important families have their own private ones, and getting information about them will be much more difficult. Wells said that he was interested in finding out who these important families were. Wells thought that at the moment his teleportation distance is 150 minutes. But using movement circles, the Magic Regulation Guild can move just like him, only for hundreds of kilometers. As it turned out, one of these circles is located in a mattress store. It was there that our hero arrived. He thought that it seemed that all the magic really was right under people's noses. He walked through his portal and thought that he was sure that the Magic Regulation Guild carefully guarded the teleportation circles. So he would have to act carefully, even after everything he had learned. His ability to quickly teleport was limited. Gravitokinesis on a motorcycle works great, although after use it remains a magical signature that shows where it is going. Usually everything has time to dissipate when the guild agents arrive, but Jessica was able to smell the scent almost immediately. If she worked for the guild, it would have been tracked long ago. Wells sat under a tree and thought that he needed to improve his teleportation skills. This is the easiest way to avoid almost all problems. If he can understand how the guild creates their teleportation circles that operate over such a long distance, then he will never be caught. He began to scan the area around and thought that he had finally found what he needed. It was difficult to see from such a distance, and he needed to get closer. The details may be too complex. He will not see them using spatial perception. As a rule, all the magic lies in carving something on some kind of plate. He started making notes in his notebook. I thought that such a circle would require a full-fledged construction. Then he rose to his feet and decided that there was no point in sitting here. Our hero created a portal and decided that it was time for him to get to work. By the way, this manhwa is called Paranoid Mage. And now let's return to the round table, at which the non-human races are sitting. Chester says, "Does anyone really believe that some killer is involved in attacks on vampires?" The vampire said that this killer actually works for werewolves. Chester said that he would not accept such reckless accusations against him. The vampire looked into his eyes with an evil look and asked, "Is this a threat?" The vampire then turned to the Archmage and said that he demanded that he publicly condemn Chester, or he would not contribute anything to the discussion. The blue man said that what kind of discussion is this? He is just hysterical out of the blue, and he can only hope that he is not so reckless as to throw accusations and also the fairy people. The vampire looked angrily at the blue man and hissed but fell silent. The Archmage said that they were investigating the attack on the nests of vampires. All suspicions among us werewolves were removed. The Archmage also said that they did not arrange this meeting so that the enmity between their peoples would continue. The purpose of their meeting is to discuss the existence of an extremely dangerous killer. Although the target of the attack was exclusively vampires, this does not mean that this will continue to be the case. The position of the Magic Regulation Guild is therefore clear on the matter. The killer is a threat to everyone under their jurisdiction. The vampire said that if werewolves were not involved in the attacks, then they must have some other clues. The Archmage said that although they don't have much, they do have something. Chester asked, "What evidence are we talking about?" The Archmage took a bearing out of his inner pocket and asked any of them if this thing seemed familiar. Wells continued his journey and thought that if Gale is from such a family, then she most likely comes to his lessons with the help of the teleportation circle. She doesn't look like someone who uses public transport to get around. If the operation is based on the information that Lucy gave him, then the closest circle associated with the bookstore will be approximately here. And he arrived at the jewelry store and then thought that of course it would be this place. And outwardly he seemed to look like the one he had seen before. They were wondering if they all looked like that. Well, he can try to copy and reproduce the circle in a computer-aided design system, which is designed for the virtual creation of objects inside the program. Well, in order to create a really high-quality layout, he needs to come closer and examine everything in detail. But even if he succeeds, he still doesn't know how it all works. And then suddenly he felt someone approaching. It must be her. And he was not mistaken. He watched that portal and it began to glow brightly. And then the same girl who constantly came to his bookstore appeared from there. There was some symbolism on her arm. He wondered if this magic circle was somehow reacting to her tattoo. Then something became clear to him. If a magical tattoo is unique to each magician, then it should open access to the use of the circle. So the Magic Regulation Guild can track where the magician entered the portal and where he exited. And given their desire to control everything, this does not surprise him. Wells was angry because he couldn't figure out how to get closer and look at everything there. The next event happens a little later. A girl with green eyes approached the cellar and greeted him, and then asked if he had seen Professor Brown. The seller replied that he had not seen anyone. She said that this was very strange. Usually he arrives earlier than her. Wells put on his professorial glasses and came out from behind the bookshelves and greeted the girl. He said that he was just looking for books. She was glad that he came and said that she already thought that he had forgotten about her. Wells thought that he almost got caught. He threw a bearing onto the floor that collected all his magical energy. While he was watching her, he completely forgot that Gale was supposed to come to his lesson today. They sat down again at their table where they usually sat, and Wells asked his interlocutor what they would do today. The girl said that she would like to learn more about the magic of movement. Wells said that this is not an easy topic, especially considering that healing magic has practically nothing to do with my movement. The girl said that she knows this, but she would like to be an elemental magician. Then half of the requirements would be as simple as shelling pears. Wells recalled that he also began to be disappointed when he was just starting to learn everything. The creation of all sorts of spatial balls seemed nonsense. But then he imagined some things. If you add a little fire magic, it will be more fun. The girl smiled and turned to our hero and said, "Is he really a gravity magician? And does he know a spell from the magic of movement?" Wells understood that sooner or later she would start talking about it. He thought that this was true. He knew the basics of gravitikinesis, but if a real magician saw this, he would immediately suspect him of incompetence. What if she realizes that he doesn't know how to do what he should be able to do? Then his identity will be revealed. The girl grabbed his hands and asked if she could see his spell. Wells was tense at this moment, but he said that perhaps he could demonstrate something. It used its magic and began to change the gravity of the chair. Thus, the chair became incredibly light and flew into the air. Wells added a little levitation and then said that of course this is not all he can do. If he had rested longer, he could have demonstrated something much better. But the girl interrupted him and said that it was incredible. Wells did not expect that she would like it. He asked if she was saying this seriously, and she looked at him with sparkling eyes. Wells put the chair back and the girl asked him if he could teach her this. Wells didn't know whether he could do it or not, but he said he would try, and it even seemed to him that he was playing his role better than he thought. A whole hour had already passed since then. Wells was telling his interlocutor that this was one of the first books he read as a young magician. It is a little complicated, but describes the basics well. The girl asked what happens. If she reads it, will she be able to learn to fly? Wells said that there was no need to get ahead of himself. At that moment, Lucy called him. Wells got nervous and didn't understand why she was calling him. The girl noticed his tension and asked if everything was okay. Wells asked for forgiveness and said that he needed to answer, and he was sure that the call would be trivial. Lucy asked the boss if he could talk now, or did she call at the wrong time? Wells told her that everything was fine and then asked the girl how she was doing. She said that he was so cute that he was worried about her. Wells told her to speak closer to the point. Then Lucy said that she had news about those two people. Things were a little confusing. In general, the guild has a clear set of rules providing for actions against ordinary people who were involved in their magical world. The law states that the one who brought them into it must be responsible for these two. Wells asked Lucy, "Is it possible that he is responsible for them?" Lucy replied that this is not entirely true, but he saved them. Technically, vampires did it. And now those people will be returned to the vampire. Naturally, our hero did not like this turn of events. He asked, "Are the victims really going to be handed over to the killers?" Lucy said that this is a stupid law, and she understands it. But for the Magic Regulation Guild, the main thing is to follow all the rules. Wells said that he needed places and names, vampires, agents, and the entire department. Lucy said that she understands what he is getting at. But if he is thinking of launching an attack on the Magic Regulation Guild, then she seriously recommends that he reconsider. Wells quickly created a portal and went out through it to his motorcycle and told Lucy not to ask unnecessary questions and tell him the names. To the average passerby, it looks like an ordinary business center. Well, underneath all the glamour and cameras lies the headquarters of the Kansas City Magic Regulation Guild. This is the Devil's Lair hidden in the most prominent place among people. Wells carefully examined this area and thought that he needed to think carefully about what to do next. But let's return to our hero's conversation with Lucy. She told him that he already knows that she kind of works for the Magic Regulation Guild. It sounds risky even for her, and she knows that he is angry, but let him be sure that she is on his side. But his plan to attack the guild sounds like suicide. Wells asked her, "Is it really advising him to just leave it all like that? They just threw innocent people to be torn to pieces. And it's still his fault. If he had just taken them to another place, this wouldn't have happened. He decided to leave them just to protect his interests. He needs to fix this." Lucy said that he needs to set his priorities correctly. Even the Archmage cannot defeat the Magic Regulation Guild in one night. He needs to think about how many people will remain in danger if he dies. She also said that she admires what he is trying to do and thinks that the Magic Regulation Guild is a real bunch of scum. But you don't have to give up everything you've worked on just because of one bad day. Wells knew she was telling the truth, but he still needed names if he wanted to prepare. The more he knows, the better he will plan everything, and the more chances he will have for success. Lucy said that she agreed with him and would get everything, just don't let him do anything stupid. Wells now stands in front of the very lair of that guild and thought about not being stupid. He will need to thank Lucy for dissuading him. Until he improves his magical abilities, there is no way he will take over the office of the Magic Regulation Guild. He clenched his fist and thought that, even if not now, he swears that they will answer for all their crimes. The following events take place the next day. The same gray-haired man with whom our hero was introduced by the werewolf was talking on the phone with Mr. Brown. He said it was terrible, then asked why he was so interested in young magicians. Wells carefully studied all the information that was available to him. He said that he was just curious. He knows that there are children who learn about their abilities quite early. But were there any opposite cases? For example, what could prevent them from using magic in childhood? The white-haired man said that he doesn't know because he's not a doctor. But maybe if they had a lack of mana or something like that, then everything is possible. But any child growing up among magicians would be full of the vis that hangs in the air. Wells said, what does it mean if someone was not among the magicians? His power simply would not be revealed? His interlocutor replied that he had never encountered such a case, but believed that it was so. Wells thought it made sense. The first time he used magic was during the attack on Shahay's fitness club. Perhaps it was then that he first felt a surge of vis, especially considering that his parents were definitely not magicians. He had always wondered what it was like to live in a family of magicians since birth. The white-haired man asked our hero why he was asking about this. Does he really have a secret child that they don't know about? Wells said that if he had it, he would not have told him. But he thanked Harry for his help and said that he would call him if he needed anything. Wells got on his motorcycle and started riding. He talked to Lucy and said that she told her that all of you in her family except her are magicians. Is that right? The girl said that this is really so. Complete fun in the Harper family if he can imagine it. Wells said it must have been difficult for her, especially as a child. The girl said that this is why Helia of Magical Regulation keeps her at her beck and call. They could not figure out what to do with an ordinary person, so they sent her to the IT department. Wells said that this was their omission. Lucy said that this big guy was flattering. She asked what kind of family he had. Wells said that Harry had already asked similar questions, and he was beginning to think that Chester asked them to throw information out of him. Lucy said he couldn't blame them for being curious. A cool and mysterious man shows up in town and starts acting like a hero. Who wouldn't want to get to know him better? Wells felt inspired at that moment and then asked, do they really think so? Lucy said that these were her words and not Chester's, but he did not have to tell her that. Wells told her that his personal life was not that interesting. Maybe he would tell her someday, Lucy asked. How about sharing stories on their first date? Wells felt awkward again. He said that her charm was painful, and was she aware of this? The girl asked him if she was making this big guy nervous. Wells replied that this was true, but in a good way. But he still didn't know if he was ready to open up to her. Lucy took a photo of herself and told him that he made her tremble with anticipation. She said goodbye to him and sent him a photo of herself on his phone. Wells. You immediately opened her message and saw a photo of her face covered with a heart sticker. Wells looked at her photographs and smiled. He understood that at least someone was cheering him up in such a difficult moment. After some time, he went to the bookstore again and met with his student. She told him that she was so tired of studying. Wells said that undoubtedly, this is a large amount of information, but she must remember why she is doing this. The girl said not to be a student, she knows that. But why do all these books have to be so boring? Wells told his interlocutor that they could take a break, and she immediately cheered up and said that he was the best teacher. Wells asked for forgiveness for the fact that he disappeared then. There was an emergency situation with one of his colleagues. The girl replied that everything is fine, and she knows that he spends a lot of time to help her, and she really hopes that this does not affect his work and everything else. Wells said that of course not. He always looks forward to their classes. And then suddenly the green-eyed beauty grabbed his hand and said that she owed him. If he ever needed her help, then let him not be shy and turn to her. Wells said that in that case he had something he could at least find out. He's been looking for new ways to travel. The Magic Regulation Guild's teleportation circles work well, but he's thinking of something more compact. The girl said that her father uses home bond, but they cannot give it to the professor, she can show it. Wells absolutely did not understand what this home bond was, but he was very interested in finding out. He said that he would be happy to take a look. The friend who lent him these books had several theories that he would like to explore. The green-eyed girl asked, "Is this theory about teleportation?" She asked the teacher if his friend was a spatial magician. Wells tensed at that moment. He asked his interlocutor, "What's the matter?" The girl approached him closer and said that he could have a lot of problems for disclosing such information without the knowledge of the master. The Magic Regulation Guild closely monitors such magic. Wells was even more tense after her words, and he asked her, what would happen if they found out? The girl said in a whisper that she only heard rumors, but they say that if Archmage Duval finds out, then no one will see them again. Wells understood that such people were most likely simply killed. Thank you for watching this video. If you liked this manhwa and would like to see a continuation, then be sure to write about it in the comments. If I see good activity in the form of comments and likes, and this video gets 500,000 views, then I will definitely make a second part, so send a link to this video to a friend. Also subscribe to the channel and press the bell so you don't miss new videos. And you can also watch other similar videos on this channel. See you later.